I think you all probably have the agenda in front of you. So I call the meeting to order. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty, justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right. Our first agenda item is public speak. We obviously have members of the public on our meeting today. Just want to remind you that we do want to keep it concise and to the point. We generally have a 3-minute limit, then we'll come back to you. It doesn't look like we're overwhelmed with the public here, so it probably isn't going to be a problem. But Amanda, do you want to go ahead and go around?
Sure thing. Okay, so Sherry Holmes, our new finance director, would you like to participate in public speak?
No, thank you.
Board.
Not at this time. I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you. So glad you're here. Jerry Cremay. I think he's trying to unmute.
Yeah.
Oh, I got your name up there.
Like my laptop does. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
And now. Yep.
Okay, I'm here to just listen, so I'll do my list. I'll do some listening.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Kathy Palazzi and Mike Palazzi.
All set, Amanda.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Loudon celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Would you like to participate?
All I'll say is thank you very much for your work. I am going to go celebrate. And so I will leave any questions you have about the Board of Education budget to the very capable hands of Superintendent Bruno and non-Irishman Jerry Cremay. And I may check back in, but I'm listening to Irish music while we're doing this. So happy St. Patrick's Day. And I hope we have the luck of the Irish in your consideration of our budget.
Thank you. Val, Bruno?
All set, thanks, visiting.
Thank you. And Jerry and Ann Cremay, I believe that's your phone number, 798-3815. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't someone else.
That's not mine.
That's not you?
No.
Do we know who that is? If you would like to participate in public speak, you can press *6.
Looks like we're connecting. There's a Carol.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything for public speak, Carol?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is that it?
Looks like it. Yeah. Yeah, looks like it. Okay, thank you, folks. So I think you all know why we're here. We're focusing primarily on the budget. We have some agenda items that kind of separate out some things. The first item is 1A to review the AHM fiscal year 21-22 budget, and this was requested to be added to the agenda. Do we have this budget? Linda, was it you that sent this? Now you're on mute, Linda.
You're muted, Linda.
I'm trying to push the button. It wasn't working. This is an old computer. Yeah, I thought I had forwarded it to you. Some time ago with the attachments. But the budget is, well, since they're combining it into one well, if you want to call it bill or for the town, instead of dividing it between the schools and the town, it's going to be $88,684, which is $4,387 less than it was last year. But last year, our line item was something like 48,000, but then partial was paid through the high school and partial was paid for the elementary school. So if you had totaled them together, we are paying less this year because of the formula.
Okay, my apologies. I see that you did send that. You didn't happen to include that in any kind of packet, did you, Amanda? Okay, yeah, all right. So it wasn't sent to all the Board of Finance members.
So there was quite a bit of discussion this year with the towns regarding two things. One, the formula used to calculate what each town's relative fraction of the total bill for the Youth Services Bureau. So basically, they tossed around a bunch of different possibilities for formulas. And we settled on one that was fairly simple. It is equally rated between the census data for the town, the last census. In other words, the number of people, total number of residents in town. And the second thing is the total enrollment for pre-K through 12th grade. Since those are kind of the two easy reference points they can have to figure out, because the amount of service we need basically scales with our youth. But since pre-K through 12 doesn't encompass the students that are, or the people, because they serve people up to age 26, I think, 25, 26. 26. We kind of decided as a group to use this as a formula. So that's kind of what's being done going forward. The second decision that was made is they were initially billing multiple entities, RAM, the town, and the school board. And the decision was made that just basically to make it simpler, to go back to what used to be done, which is just, billing the town directly, to make it completely transparent what the whole bill was to the Youth Services Bureau. So that's the total number from my perspective. The overall budget is going up, I think, around 3%, but because of the changeover to the new formula and the fact that our total pre-K through 12 enrollment is lower. Before, it was weighted just from the number of students, relative number of students in RAM. And for us, our pre-K through 12 enrollment overall is quite a bit lower than that. So in a sense, what's happened is we as a town have netted out with a lower bill this year, just simply because of demographics in the change of formula. Even though the overall spending has increased slightly, our share of it decreases.
Yeah, I do have those documents, and I apologize. Linda had sent them on and requested, I think, Amanda and I forwarded to the Board of Finance, and reading that wasn't really thinking about in terms of this meeting. But at any rate, I did send it on to all of you. Amanda, if you give me a second to share my screen, I will share that.
The other thing is also with some of the programs like Chores hooks up high school kids with seniors. So they're doing chores for seniors too. So AHM really hits a broad spectrum of townspeople, not just school aged.
Okay. Right, which is kind of what the point was of the formula, right?
Right.
So if you flip over, you should be seeing my screen now. This is the formula that Eric was referring to that shows the particular breakout, how it's divided between the pre-K enrollment and the town census combined average across the 3 municipalities, the fiscal year total, the last year's total, and then the dollar difference, which is about $4,300, $4,400. Okay.
And the other thing is, if you subtract the 552,000, that still means AHM is providing $921,836 of services that the towns aren't even paying for, that are being paid for through fundraising and grants and what have you.
Is that shown on this budget as income?
Yeah, go down, if you go to, yeah, you can see what the total income is.
Yeah. So you can see down here in the lower level, town agreement fiscal year 2021, 3% increase that was spoken of earlier. And then the breakout is on the previous page.
So Eric, so this number, this $88,000, is that divided in half between the town budget and the Board of Ed budget?
So it was initially divided in the past. That was, as far as I understand, was shared 3 ways. The town paid half and the other half was paid. I never got a straight answer from that, whether that was paid by AES or whether that was paid by RAM. From my perspective, originally, ultimately, it's all town tax dollars, regardless of where it's coming from. So it does represent an increase in the town's portion of the budget, but it should be directly showing up as a decrease in either the AES budget or the RAM budget.
Because in the town proposed budget, we have $48,862 as a line placement. So
right, and we do need to increase that and put in the correct number. And I can show you what the budget looks like with that correct number, because I do have an edited version of that. But that hadn't really, at the last meeting, that hadn't really gone through or fully been approved. And I'm not necessarily sure this budget is completely final anyway at this point, because, at least Marlboro still has some significant issues with it.
Has the Board of Selectmen reviewed this, Eric?
No, not that I know of. We didn't have this data when the Board of Selectmen completed their budget.
Okay. This is under, I think it's like a social services or public welfare line item. What's the line item? Do you remember?
Sure, I'll tell you in just a sec.
Or what department, I should say.
Well, AHM has their own line item and it's.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's on line 36 of the original budget document.
Yeah,
services. Yeah.
Right, 426 is the full budget for it. But since it's really only one line item.
Yeah. So as Diane pointed out, that's $48,862. So this isn't a good way to start a budget meeting. We're already $40,000 worse off than we were last meeting.
Correct.
I just want to know where all the rest of the money comes from to pay the bill. So I guess.
Mark, there's 50,000 in our budget.
You have 50,000 for AHM in the school budget?
That because we have the social worker who comes in. So that 88,000, that can't possibly include everything for RAM, for us, and for the town, unless the town has a really tiny percentage that they're paying. because we've been over 40 for a few years because we have Sherry that comes. She does all of our social work services for the kids for their IEPs. So I know that if you look at the last 4 years, you couldn't go less than 40,000 in the last 4 years in our budget with what we've had to pay with our contract with AHM.
But is that covered under the local service contracts for EHM, or is that separate billed item?
That's why I'm surprised that, she's looking at one contract there. This is the first that I've heard that we're going to have one bill.
Well,
Because we
the schools,
pay AHM directly.
the schools, if they need more services, they do have a contract with the AHM for additional benefit services. So I'm not sure what that contract and what that bill would be.
Right. So Mark, that 88,000, that doesn't cover everything that we pay AHM
Right.
in there. So
Right.
that is
Right. So
right.
Well, the school has a separate contract then,
Yes.
above and beyond this. Okay.
Correct. Of high 40s every year for the past 4 years, because we have a social worker that comes from AHM, and that's our contracted social worker. We don't have a full-time social worker.
right. So that's not part of this 88,684, and which, okay, just that one. I thought you were saying you thought it might be. My guess is it's in this number I just highlighted, which is the 188,695, the program revenue. It looks like it.
It looks like it might actually be in those local service contracts, the 240.
No, I think the local serve. Oh, you
Is
know,
this-
you're right. Why?
Yeah, I bet you we're in the 248 there. We're
Oh, okay.
probably about the 48,000 probably of the
All
248.
right. Yeah, I didn't look at those numbers, but you're right, because I thought that this is not, I'm sorry, Linda, but this is not designed well. I thought this was the 248 was a subtotal of the 3 town contracts. So
Right.
that confused me. Okay.
Yeah.
No, you're right. That's probably what it is, this local service contract then.
Yeah, and then on the right-hand side there, if you look, what's, so that's income on the left, or the expenditures on the right?
Yeah, it probably
okay.
comes into salary, wages, and benefits in here is what my guess would be for your social
Yeah.
worker. So
Yeah, but I'm sure that ours are
gotta be allocated.
in the 4720. So those numbers, Linda, the Andover, Hebron, and Marlboro numbers, they wouldn't necessarily include, even for Hebron and for Marlboro, any additional services that they utilize AHM for like social work and psych services.
Right.
So we're kind of back to where we were, which is that we are
So are
under,
we missing $40,000 somewhere?
we're under budgeted currently. Current budget does not adequately cover the 88,684 that's being requested.
But it
Correct.
had to be paid somewhere else because last year we only paid 46.
That's
Right.
right.
That's
I was
what they
just
were
looking at the
saying, yeah.
last year's budget, and it's 46. Yeah.
It's either paid by RAM or paid by ES or both.
I believe, Mark, that's it, is that we paid all of our costs directly, and that the town didn't pay for our AHM services.
Okay, I
So
know
the town paid
RAM,
for part of their services, and the AES paid for part of the services, plus the additional individualized service from the social
if
worker.
I remember from looking at the old, whatever you want to call them, from AHM being on the board, I think all the elementary schools in all the towns were given a set price. And RAM was the RAM formula. And then for the town to come up with 17% or whatever it was that year, they took 17% of the budget, came out with a figure, subtracted AHM, the elementary school and RAM, and that's what the town line item was. That was the line they could change to make the 17%.
Yeah. So RAM paid part of it and AES may have paid part of it, is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we have to recognize that changed this year.
We just need to make sure we have it where it needs to be.
Yep.
And when you think about it, Yes, I'm sure some families do use AHM youth services, but that is, in a sense, the majority of those services go to school-age children in some form or another.
Well, I think that my personal feeling is that the funding formula, the way they're allocating it, probably just makes it simpler and easier. So, I would be in favor of it because of that, that reason. It just makes sense. We've talked about that in prior meetings. So I think we have really two things to address here as a Board of Finance. One is, I don't know that we necessarily approve or disapprove of this budget. I mean, isn't it tied in largely to the agreement that was signed between the town and AHM, Eric, or am I not clear on that?
Well, I'm got to tell you, I'm not completely clear on that myself. I talked to Steve Fish prior to this meeting, but I need to reach out to Tressa and get that, because I was assuming it was very much like Eastern Highlands Health District, which is the health district comes up with a budget and they just, charge the towns essentially.
Yeah.
And the towns have input if one of their members is on the board of directors, and sits in on it, but, and I would say since we have pretty strong town representation on AHM, I'm not overly concerned with it.
So we certainly can review and discuss it. I mean, I don't know, because it's not given here, I don't know where the 3% increase is coming from. It doesn't seem outrageous to me. But, again, I'm not familiar with the particular budget. So we can certainly discuss it and review it. I don't know whether voting on it one way or the other is any more than a, affirmation that we think it's reasonable. I don't know that it has any legal or other obligation or effect. Not knowing that, I'm a little hesitant to do much unless everybody's comfortable with it. So that's thing one that we need to probably figure out and resolve. The second item is that, as Diane pointed out, we're $40,000 under budgeted, and that's going to have to be added into the current budget to take care of that, which you said you've already done, Eric, I guess, in your version.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've got a version of the budget with that in there.
Okay.
So we're going to increase the town of Andover budget to 88,000 from the 48 we have. How did it get paid last year? It had to be close to this amount of money last year.
Well, that's just it. I looked up the
That's
old
what I'm
budget
looking at. Yeah.
and I think we had 46 in there. So, and granted, I'm looking at a spreadsheet that wasn't necessarily the final. But I'm struggling to remember how it used to be split and now it's all under the town. Well, not all, but the 88 is under the town. I can't remember how that happened. I don't know if we maybe chose to make that happen. But last year, yeah, it looks like one of the final last budgets that I had that was provisional had it at 46.
Okay.
Correct. Last year's approved budget was $46,536.
Okay, so that was probably the budget we passed. So in the past, we'd split it with the school, and now it's being put all in the town budget. And I, for one, cannot recall whether that was something that we had chosen to do. I know in the past, when we've gone through line by line, some of our budgetary items, we have made some kind of accounting choices. But I don't specifically recall doing that.
No, the decision was made years ago by the towns for some reason. It was before I was on the AHM board. Originally, it was all one bill. And then I don't know what towns decided it should be divided between the towns and the schools. And now they're going back to one bill.
Apparently.
So are we saying last year there was a bill for the elementary school and then there was a bill for the town? And that's,
And-
so we have to
Yeah.
account for that. We have to.
That's
make
right.
sure
And
we're doing-
there was also a bill
Apples to
that went
apples.
to Ram High School.
Right. It's not that
Right.
AHM's budget is doubling or something.
Right,
It's that we
right.
had it accounted for differently.
We just got to make sure we keep apples to apples, so we're not looking at huge variances.
It's apples to apples from the standpoint of the actual cost. It's not apples to apples from the standpoint of where it is in the budget.
Right, it's got to be transparent, right? So,
Right, so what we need to do is we need to get from AHM a listing of last year, which entities were, we know what the town was billed last year. We need to know what was billed to the elementary school, what was billed to RAM, and say, are those subtracted from their budgets so that what's added to our budget equals out? That's pretty much all we got to figure out.
Yeah, we have to
Right.
net it out.
right.
Agreed.
And then, this is a small amount of money relative to everything else, but we should just kind of keep it in mind that if it's all going on the town and last year it was split, whatever the school budget increase is sort of artificially lowered by that, because we're offloading 40,000 onto the town.
Right. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to get the information from last year so we can figure out how we should do it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it doesn't change our, it doesn't change our overall numbers. We
No,
have to approve.
it's the same way, one way or the other, whether it's in the school budget or in the town budget, but it's,
Yeah, I do
you
think
know.
having a better level of understanding would be helpful.
Well, I
Yeah.
would have assumed that the school, if they paid a part of it last year, they included it in their proposed budget this year based on last year's cost. So I
Not
just
if
want to
they
make sure,
Potentially, yeah.
not if they knew that this was coming.
I don't know.
Can I ask?
Valerie, you have any idea? Yeah.
Yeah.
Valerie?
No,
Chair
I,
recognizes Valerie with her hand up. Yeah. Oh, looks like she locked up.
You're frozen, Val.
Excellent timing as always to have technical difficulties.
I think Rob scared her off. Okay.
Oh yeah, that was me. Totally.
Stan.
The computer gremlins got her. Always is the case when it's
Yeah.
If
Well, we
Mark
can-
can
we need to-
stop sharing his screen, then we can see. I can't see anybody.
she's just blanked out. I think her computer, she's
Oh,
Oh,
got a
you may
bad
have it
connection.
maximized, yeah.
But anyway, I think we are done with this part. Looking at the actual AHM budget.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Are
Okay.
each town like Andover expected to pay based on their amount over the total of everything, everybody? Is it pro rata or is it based on in proportion to
Well,
each town?
that's what's in this formula right here. This is in that, the second document that was sent. So this, again, this is what Eric was talking about. Originally, it was just based on a pro rata of the school enrollment, I believe, right, Eric? And
Yeah,
then-
the
and
high
they
school enrollment.
broken it out, so they mixed
Ram census.
the allocation between the enrollment plus the census data.
Okay, and that's all up to date?
That's, yeah, 2019, but,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an attempt at a finer grain pro rata, but it's the same idea, is that whatever our ratio of population is.
Oh, so it says fiscal year 2021, we paid $93,000.
correct.
There you go.
Correct.
That was the total allocated to the town.
Total
We don't know
allocation,
where,
right.
who
But
paid.
where
it
it came from, we don't know.
wasn't the town operationally, it was
Yeah,
schools as well.
okay.
Yep.
Mark, I do think the Board of Selectmen should be brought up to speed on this to assist us in, figuring this whole thing out. I mean, why should we take the whole rap for everything?
Well, I think, yeah, again, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think that there is really not any, I'm guessing that, we can vote on the Board of Finance all we want and approve this budget, but it doesn't have any force of action until, frankly, probably until the town residents vote and approve the budget. there is I don't know the content of the memorandum of understanding. I'm not sure if that's actually what it is between the Board of Selectmen and the AHM, whether that, if that dictates how the bills or invoices are to be paid, or where the agreement is as to the costs. I would think that there's something out there that indicates how these costs are allocated and how they're going to collect for these costs.
Right. I just think that, they should have a full accounting of what's going on also, even before we do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that absolutely they need to have it before we take any firm action. And again, I don't think there's any firm action for us to take at this point.
Right.
But I would agree with you, Kurt, that we probably need to review this, comment on it, but it probably needs to go to the Board of Selectmen also for their input.
Valerie's back.
My computer
Valerie.
died. I don't know why, but I had two things I wanted to say on that. No, I didn't know that we were going to wind up with one bill. So it is in our budget for the, whatever it was, the 40 something thousand. However, when they switch to one bill, if I could make a suggestion, because although we're not getting anything with the newest round of American Relief, there are a lot of funds that have come through that would allow either the town or the school to be able to, with some of this relief funding that's come in, use it on social service type things that we should be prepared for. So, for example, the money that is coming in now, the new relief fund for towns, I think Andover, the town of, was supposed to, it's not final yet, but like 319, and the school's not getting any on this one. But in all of the other municipalities, both municipality and school can use it for social service things. So if more money comes through, we may be able to, in fact, take some of that's billed to AES, whether it's a bill that goes to the town or to us. If it says that it's via AES, we may be able to do something with that, and the town may, and RAM also may be able to. So having a bill that does specify where those costs are in relation to why they're there would be a good thing. So it's, I think the 300's in there. So
is it in the 300s? That's where I was trying to see.
Yeah, if you keep going on there, hold on, just keep going. You'll see where this particular one, it's where, go back one. On this particular one, it's in, and this one, it would be in support staff. Because the services that we take from them is for Sherry, our social worker.
But Sherry is above and beyond this $88,000, correct? That's separate.
We've always, Diane, from what I understand, we've always gotten our own bill unique to us and paid.
Is that bill on an hourly basis? Because that's not kind of how the AHM budget is structured. So I'm concerned that you may be paying for both. And I don't want to assume that
we are paying, that's why, do you want me to send you our contract? We are paying a certain fee, plus we pay, if you keep going, there's another spot where you'll see it. Oh, right there. Yeah. Wait, go back. I think it's it's 110 there. That's where I think it is.
Support staff.
On the bottom. Because it's.
Well, you've got 110 in many different areas. So
I don't have mine in front of me for me to see. It's go to this special, keep going. Hold on.
In school, you've got
there's
school
the
administration
support staff there, but no, that's Holly. That's the special ed director. I think on this particular comparison by function, keep going. I think there's 2 more pages to this one. Right there. See,
social work,
right there. And I know that's the one.
Which category? Oh, under student support services. Okay.
And I know that's the category, Mark, because this was the one I think that Diane brought up last time, maybe Louise, as to why the $700 was there for this year. They said, is that all you paid? No, we had prepaid that 43 to AHM. Yes. So
All right,
see
so-
how it went 41 and then all of a sudden 85, it would have been in the 40s. This year's in the 40s, and the proposed budget, because AHM had told us already there was going to be a rate increase, or had told Laura in January, that's why that budget was the 50,200 instead of 48. So we already do have it in our budget. So if they have decided that they're going to bill something to the town that had normally been billed to us, it would come out of there. So I will get you our current contract and send that to you guys. So that'll help you figure out if they're going to be billing the town now for something instead of us, then yes, it would be in our budget and yours currently.
Yeah, so I think that's right. I mean, it looks, you wouldn't have been able to prepay it if it was some kind of hourly invoicing that was done for separate services. And clearly that looks like a flat fee. So it makes sense to me that that's right where it is. I think that's probably that mystery solved.
I'll get the contract to you guys though.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Is the social worker actually an employee of the town, or when you say contracted, is an outside
No.
vendor?
She works for AHM and she has set times that she comes to us. She's contracted for a certain number of days, not hourly. So when they would sign that contract, they would contract, let's say, based on, and actually it should be coming up soon that we have to re-sign it for next year. That's why I said I'll give you our existing one and they should be readying our new one soon. So if we say we need Sherry there, Tuesdays and Thursdays, let's say, based on the number of hours that we need for social work services, the contract says you get her 60 days or whatever per year. So I know that that's what the contract states, is it's not an hourly rate, it's the number of.
What happens if more is needed than whatever's in the contract? Let's say it's a bad year and kids are in need.
I don't know, because the contract comes up sometime to sign between May and the beginning of July. And I'll be honest with you, I started late July, so I didn't sign that contract. That would have been Mr. Bridey and Sally and Laura, one of the three of them that actually signed it. So, if there was talk of this, and I'm not saying there wasn't talk of this, doing this, I personally just didn't know to take out whatever was in there.
Yeah, it may well come under the psychological services or some other, because Louise got a good point. I mean, you're not going to stop your social work in 60 days if something crazy happens, right? So, yeah,
So I'll get that for you guys.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all right, this is helpful, I think. So we've probably solved that thing, but I think Kurt is right. We probably need to make sure that the Board of Selectmen's apprised, and we probably have identified it here. Valerie can confirm when she reviews the contract and sends it on. But that would make a lot of sense right there. That was,
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Board of Finance, you all agreed to the changed service contract, right? Because wasn't that presented to the board a couple of months ago?
yes.
Okay, so that service contract did two things. One, it put set in stone the formula for calculating, and it also stated there that it was going to be billed just to the towns, to one entity.
Correct.
So there shouldn't be a total surprise to the board.
No, it shouldn't be. No, and we've talked about this funding formula a couple different times, absolutely, during that contract. And we didn't sign the agreement. I think that's either you or the Board of Selectmen, but we did approve it. We agreed that it made sense. We didn't have a budget at that time, but I think the memorandum or the agreement we did approve.
Right. We've only really seen a budget from AHM, a week ago.
Okay. So I think that's settled in terms of the funding, and I think that we have found where the offset is in the school budget. That seems to be the case. Do any of the board members have any other questions about this particular budget? Linda, is there anything particularly driving that increase?
I'm kind of looking at the door, hoping my husband would walk in. He's president of the board of AHM.
I mean, it's not. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he said because of well, this past year, the services at AHM have been more heavily needed. Problems with children, problems with home. They've had to hire a couple more employees this past year.
Okay. But I think somebody made the point that this isn't a huge line item in our town budget, but it is also not insignificant.
Wait a minute.
Some regulatory
Wait a minute.
issues, too.
The president of AHM.
Well, no, I didn't, just.
He just walked in. Hold on. The increase, the 3% increase.
Oh, the 3% increase, yeah. As far as, well, I think I heard what you said. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Very briefly on that, I don't have everything right in front of me here, but I was just talking to our executive director, but we do have additional costs that have been incurred this year because of the COVID. Some staffing costs are probably going to be there that we didn't anticipate. There are the normal increases in benefits and things of that nature, but that was probably the main push. We have I just heard tonight, I haven't got all the information together right now, but I did hear that there's some regulations or some things that are coming down from the state that Tressa was talking to me about, Tressa Giordano, our executive director. So that was something else that they had anticipated, and that seems to be coming through. So that's kind of what that 3% is all about. And I guess unless you have other questions, but I think that's where I'm coming from right now.
I don't. I do have one suggestion, and I'll leave it to the other board members, and that's that it's as with other budgets, it's helpful to see the differentials in the particular accounts. It just gives everybody a sense of confidence that, okay, we're not bumping the travel budget by 50% or something like that without really understanding where that increase is coming from. So that's just a suggestion for next round.
That sounds good. Yep.
Show where the variances are and where the differentials are. And, inflation happens, right? We know that certain things tend to cost more, not everything. We're in a period of very low inflation, but it does happen. And so it doesn't sound unreasonable to me, but.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, Mark, and that's a very good point. Those are some of the things that actually I was just talking with Tressa just about 10 minutes ago. Some of the things that we might want to do going forward from here, even before we're going to have a meeting. I'm not sure if it even came up, or we do have the oversight committee is going to be meeting next Monday right now with the town leaders and all to finalize the municipal line item budget. And so some of those points I think are starting to come out just going through this process right now. So I appreciate your comments and certainly would bring that forward. I think the other thing I wanted to mention to you that Tressa did just say to me too is that the clinical program is being stressed more now because of the needs that we're finding with the students. There's a lot of things going on. So that clinical program we're having a hard time meeting some of that demand, but so just to give you a better scope of what we're dealing with right now with the school population and with the kids.
Yeah, totally understandable, especially this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so I hope that helps a little bit. But yeah, I do appreciate the idea that we can show those variances in the future for you. So if we see an increase or anything, we can point those things out. I think that could actually be provided even before we meet for Monday. That might be something we can bring forward, Eric.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll pass that along to Yara Ford. She's our CFO. So we can show that.
It's a pretty significant amount of interest income too. You guys must have a decent endowment or fund.
Yeah, there is. There is a pretty good interest income there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. Anybody else on the board have any questions relative to this budget at this time? I think we're all agreed we'll probably revisit it, and it probably needs to go to the Board of Selectmen also
Mhm. Yeah. The only last thing, Mark, that I'd like to mention, and maybe this has already been brought up, and I know Eric understands this. It's one of the things I do like to bring up just as this year or the last 2 years since I've been president, is the idea that, the total budget for AHM, it's about, for the towns, right now, it's a 37% of the funds to run the entire operation there comes from the 3 towns and somewhat from Columbia, but the 3 towns primarily. The other 63% is grants and fundraising. And so it's a heck of a deal, for something. And what I'm saying there too is, we aren't contractors, we're partners with the towns. We really consider ourselves to be almost like a think of it as a department of the town. So it's a heck of a deal. So our fundraising efforts are stellar, and the grant writing efforts are phenomenal up there to keep us afloat and to provide the services that we provide. So I think it's just important to keep some of that in mind too. That's all.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Are there any grants possibly out there that would actually come in handy if the student rate has to go up as far as needing extra care, extra help or anything like that?
Yeah, Louise, that's a good question. We were on the phone just the other day, about 3 days ago, with Kathy Austin, who's the co-chair of the budget committee, along with Tony Harp. The two of them have been pushing. I'm not sure if you've seen it in the news or not. That's with the state. I understand, with the state budget. And one of the things that they're looking at is increasing funding to the nonprofit YSBs, the Youth Service Bureaus, which AHM is a nonprofit YSB. So they're looking at that kind of increase in funding through the state budget. And what they're looking at right now would be the mechanism in which they transfer the funds to the various YSBs, meaning would it be a grant or something along those lines? And they probably are going to be some kind of grant. And it's looking pretty good that there might be a good chance that we might have some increase in funding. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that front. That would help us with perhaps additional staff needs or whatever it may be.
Okay, that's good news.
That's very good news. We'll see what happens. We're just keeping our fingers crossed.
Okay.
Any more input or questions from the board on this budget as it stands now?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So with respect to this budget, there's a couple of things we can do. We can entertain a motion to take some type of action here. My personal feeling is that we do not and probably should not take action on this until we have some clarification and it's passed before the Board of Selectmen for their review also. But we could also make a non-binding motion and vote on it as well. If no one makes a motion, we'll just move on to our next agenda item. So I'll leave that to the board. All right. Rob?
Agreed.
Okay. All right, hearing no motions, then I'm going to go ahead and move on. We'll table that and move it on to the next meeting agenda item. Or next meeting agenda. So I'm not sure when the Board of Selectmen is meeting next.
Regularly scheduled meeting first, second Monday of April.
Yeah, so
that would be.
Yeah.
It is April 12th.
12th, yeah.
All right, so Amanda, if you could go ahead and put this on as old business to our March 24th meeting agenda. And we may or may not follow up with anything there. We'll kind of have to see where that goes.
Will do.
Okay. The next agenda item is 3B, which is board and department presentations. We haven't requested anything specific. Eric, I don't know if you have any other changes that or any more input that you'd like to make regarding the department budgets.
No, not at this time. I don't have any.
Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions for Eric regarding departments? I mean, we can talk about that during the last item or the actual discussion of the budget too. It might make more sense, but go ahead.
I have one question, and I briefly talked before the meeting started with Eric about this, the RAM levy that we have, and we have that credit coming back to us of 77,000. So you're gonna just update that number, or do we have to wait until the RAM budget gets passed before we update that number?
So there was initial 77,000 that came off of our budget. I have not looked at the RAM budget in the last week or so, but as far as I know, that's currently reflected in the RAM budget. Because remember, the RAM budget has decreased to, I'll give you that number.
52,940.
Correct.
Less 77,600 and whatever dollar we're gonna get credit.
When was that decision?
I looked on the RAM website today and they have an updated budget book out there for March 1st. So that's in that March 1st budget book.
So you're expecting that this anticipated levy of $5.2,940,000 is going to be reduced by 70,000?
Yeah, 77,000.
See, I feel like that reduction was built into the 5.2 million. Because remember,
I couldn't tell by looking at the spreadsheet they had out there because it was a separate item at the end. It didn't show as a credit in the levy part for the percentages for the town. So it was very hard to figure that out. So that may be a good question to look at.
I'm actually have a conversation tomorrow with Lori Blake scheduled, and I'll ask her that specifically. Not sure she's going to have that answer, but we'll ask.
Yeah. So they have out on their website their budget book, and it has a summary page that just summarizes the budget, the town levies, and the town credits for the excess funds coming back to the towns.
Right, but I thought the levy actually included that now, because
I couldn't tell how they did it.
Yeah, and I may be wrong on that. I mean, but I did converse, I asked for an updated budget real early in March, and I got the info from I'll try to pull it up and see the letter or the email I got from Scott, but I'm pretty sure that number, now I had heard later they decided there was an additional allocation that they were considering, coming back to the town that would have been about an additional 16,000 off the budget, but not 70,000.
Yeah, so this,
But I haven't seen an updated, budget that reflected that.
yeah, the last one I saw out there was March 1st.
Yeah. Let me just look real quick.
If you go out there, they just have one document out there that's like 4 pages long that just gives a high level summary of the budget, and all those calculations are on there.
You talking about that updated proposal budget book for March 1st?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It looked separate to me, but it could be included, like Eric says. I don't know.
Yeah, I can almost tell you just by looking at this that it would be almost, unless you sat here and total all the numbers by hand, it would almost be impossible to tell. So
Yeah,
this-
so they show an offset credit to the town of 77,851.74.
Right.
You know, based on the audited surplus.
Right. That's what I'm
Um,
talking about.
But that number, as far as I know, was wrapped back into the
Sum of
budget.
the
Right,
sum of our levy for the school budget and the capital budget, the operations.
right. So it's basically, what we owe is the combination of the levy for the capital improvement budget and the levy for, you know, for that. I
No,
did
but
hear
see, it
that-
has gross revenue, so there's no credit showing, so you would not know by looking at that. It has the gross expenditures, the less the revenues, the net, capital budget, the total, and then our percentage of that.
Right. I mean, I could be wrong, and I can certainly reach, you know, seek clarification from Scott Leslie on what they're actually.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have the right number. $77,000 would be nice to find.
Sure.
Yeah, it agreed. All right, yeah, and we probably, I don't know, Diane, did you answer your question? I mean, we don't really know, I guess, is
I
the,
mean, we can't tell from this spreadsheet because you don't know. I
No.
mean, I didn't add up the whole column, but I'm assuming their subtotals are right. So to me, it's a separate outside of that has the gross, the revenues, less the revenues, and then the levy, and then a credit at the end. Doesn't show a credit for the levy against our bill due, whatever.
it's not clear to me what all these different sections are too, the budget
No.
appropriation request. So you've actually got it broken down between an operating budget, a capital.
And a capital
plan
budget.
And then they've got these expenditures and revenues plus capital, you know, so.
So Rich, this is really the sum of the whole budget.
Correct, but they don't necessarily show you the levy and how that's calculated. So you have probably zero.
Up on top.
It would take some work.
Yeah, so we're 17% right there.
Right. But there's
But to me,
5 point, there's a
17% of the 30. I don't know, I didn't do the number. I didn't calculate the number, so. So if 30,
Yeah, so if you look at those numbers, that's 5,209 plus
51,303.
1 is, you know, 5,260. Yet we're showing. No,
we have
that's-
52940 in our book. But is that 529 17% of that 30,000? That number above? 30,708? Because there's two components. There's the operating and the capital.
Right, but you're right. I mean, the number doesn't really add up.
Yeah, so we're at the so then there's $51,000.
You're 51,000 plus the 5.2 million. That is like Eric said, that's 5,260,000.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I'm not even sure why they put this credit in there if it's not going to apply to that, but.
So we just flat out have to get from RAM what their current, and I mean, they're still holding budget meetings. So it's not like they've come up with a final budget either.
Right.
I mean, the bottom line is we know it's going to be about $5.2 million. I mean, plus or minus an unknown number.
Yeah, it's just not clear from that document. It's, you know, maybe go through it with it. And it sounds like you've gone through it in fairly close detail, Diane, but still not.
I didn't recalculate all their numbers. I prevented myself from doing that.
You're retired. I mean, what else do you have to do? I'm gonna get myself into trouble here, right? So, okay. Nothing prevented me from doing it either, but it's time for all of us, right?
I
So,
know.
okay. Okay, let's, anything else on that, Diane? That was your.
No, that's the only thing I kind of came across today.
Okay. I guess since we're just talking about board and department presentations, I'd like to give Val and any other members of the Board of Education an opportunity if you want to add anything to, in advance of our discussion before we ask questions. You had submitted some information about the prepaid amounts that we had asked you for some information about before. So, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to digest that. Frankly, I hadn't. I planned to do it this weekend before to kind of be knocked flat because of my vaccination. It just didn't go well. But there was a fair amount of detail in there, so I didn't have really a chance to digest it personally. Does anybody have any questions for Val? Or Val, do you have anything you want to add, or Jerry?
I'll answer any questions anybody has. I know that when I put that together and sent it to you guys, I tried to take a lot of the numbers that were probably a little bit difficult to understand in the way they were in the worksheet and add a bit of a narrative to it so that you can see from April all the way through kind of why those numbers, how they evolved. So if anybody has any other questions on them, let me know.
I have one question, and I'm looking at that spreadsheet that you broke out the salary percentage increases. We had questions on that. And I'm looking at the teacher line item. And you said the teacher increase was 3.17% and a pre-K teacher to grade level increase of 5.3% to come up with that 834. But my question for you, wasn't that pre-K teacher, and maybe I'm not looking at this right, we had a teacher who retired and that pre-K took that teacher's.
No, what that had to do with in terms of, it had to do with a few things in there. So number one, I know, I'm trying to remember how Mark had worded it. He had asked about the teacher contracts. The teacher contract was the 3% increase. But then there were changes to salaries that were no longer going to be funded through grants and moving those around. It had nothing to do specifically with, it's the same number of teachers. We actually saved money from the retired teacher to the teacher that's coming in. We lost in the paraprofessional position, but it was, I forgot, I know Laura had explained one other thing in there, Mark, and I don't know if you recall. When she was on, she explained one more thing. And I'm trying to remember how you worded the question to her. Because you had asked, why is it a little bit more than 3?
Well, yeah, the contract was 3.17% increase, but
Right.
the budgeted, in the comments in the budget had it at 3.99%. So I was asking, why are the salaries going up 3.99% if the contract was only 3.17%?
And it wasn't. I'm going to actually ask Laura now. I'm going to send a message because I can't remember. It had to do with that very specific question. Also had to do with where the funding had come from for staff prior to that, like the use of Title I, which we lost for this year. Title I had paid a percentage of salaries for a particular teacher.
So salaries weren't originally in that same
So
category.
let me go
lost
back
that
and ask
Title
that.
I, right.
So when you had something that was offsetting a salary, a revenue item, you were just putting the net expense in your ledger and not showing the revenue side?
That's how they had done it. Yes.
Let's not ever do that again.
I know. It's a few things we're not going to do again. Sherry's taking notes in her head.
I looked it up in the charter. You are supposed to account for revenue in your budget request. It's part of the charter with the town. So
Well, and I know
Um,
that she always has. It's just as Mark had pointed out last time that it wasn't right there. Mark said he wants it
Right.
next time right underneath where the offset is. And I told him absolutely we would from here going forward do it that way.
So I don't want to make a lot of work, so I'm going to ask this question because to me, there's a whole revenue side outside of taxation that the school has. And trying to figure out some accounting of that for last year or this current year, I'd be happy with this year. So
It's in
we
the PowerPoint.
understand where the revenue's coming in to pay for some. Because when you look at the expenses, it's not a true expense if it's a net amount. I'm just trying to, I'm missing the other side of the coin, I guess I'm saying to make
The packet that you guys all got when I presented to you guys, it is in that PowerPoint. There are specific slides that say, here's our other sources of revenue, Title I, Title II.
What about tuition?
They were all in there.
But they're just dollar amounts. They're not.
And it says what was paid for with them.
I don't remember seeing that. I remember seeing just dollar amounts, but not what departments they go against or what line items they go against. Or what line items are less because they were only showing a net expense and not the.
It didn't show you the line item number with it. Let's see.
I don't think so.
If
But
Mark-
I've been looking at too much stuff, so.
I know. So let's see. Mark, do you have that PowerPoint that you can? Because I just went to pull it up on my screen and I realized we were on Zoom. Sorry. I saw you pulled it up a few minutes ago. Do you have that in the packet? Nope, that one's Rams. At the beginning of that whole pack. Yeah, keep going. Yep. Yep. Okay, we missed it. Sorry. Keep going. Okay, stop. Wait, go back one. Go back one slide. There you go. So the one with the yellow, the next slide. There you go. So these were, and this is where if you want it side by side. So these were for preschool, for example. The school readiness grant. The school readiness grant was used to pay the part of one paraprofessional and the one teacher's salary. This was just the one revenue source. The Smart Start, the 65,000 paid for second teacher salary and part of the second paraprofessional. The quality enhancement money that comes in of 3881, that has an earmark, and that can only be used for professional development. So then all of the other costs go through the 90.
But this is just preschool.
Right. So go to the next page. There you go. So these were the other sources of revenue that we had gotten. We won't for 2021, but 16,245 came in for 2020 in Title I, 3628 in Title II, 406 in Title III, and 10,000 in Title IV. And I believe it's the next slide, Mark, that said that's what we did with them. So the roughly 20,000 for Title I and 22, that went to pay part of the salary for the remedial reading professional, which was Mrs. Caraboni. She's obviously still the reading specialist. We lost Title I. So that meant that 16,000, Diane, that we had gotten in 2020 that we didn't get in 2021 for Title I, that had to be absorbed into the salary spot. The $500 that we get for Title III, that goes to our consortium, and then the Title IV, that 10,000 there partially funded Mrs. Frazier's role, as she's tech and she does the remedial math. So we are getting Title IV this year, but next year we won't, because it alternates. If you lose Title I one year, you lose Title IV the next year. So
we planned ahead for that, right?
We have planned ahead now that we know. Like we
Okay.
know, Sherry and I actually just had this conversation. It's like, okay, this year we didn't get Title I. Next year we know we're not going to get Title IV.
Right.
So we've got a plan for that.
What about non-resident tuition? Do we
Um,
have any non-resident tuition revenue?
We have only one child right now that just started in kindergarten this year. that is non-resident.
Okay. So we should account for that revenue too, so.
Well, we're not sure that right now. They actually have petitioned to the Board of Ed to make some accommodation. We're not sure if the accommodation's not made, if they will continue, because it's an issue, they're building. And it's an issue of whether or not they are going to be a non-resident once the house is built. So if that house goes up quick, then next year there wouldn't be any revenue because they wouldn't be considered a non-resident. So we can't plan for that, because completely past a few months from now, they are paying this year, but next year they could be an Andover resident. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't have revenue because they'd be residents. But there's only one family.
All right, so let's make sure going forward that we have some revenue, true expenses and true revenues, not netting expenses by revenues, because
Yep, I'll do that from here.
it
going
makes it
forward.
really hard to follow. That I just having a very hard time following the numbers. So there's no other revenue that we have other than that.
No.
Okay.
Mark, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
And then, so I have another thing. Didn't we get some money this year from the state for, I'm gonna say COVID, but that may not be the
Yep,
right word,
that
that we
was in
used to
here
pay
too.
for
Yep, that
like,
was in here
computers
too.
and things like that?
Yep.
So-
Mark, if you go, it was after this, it said where the COVID money came in,
What did we use it for?
right there, right there.
So we don't know what we used it against. So that's a piece I'm missing. I know we got this money, but what did it pay for?
We had 18,700 and then round 25,000 and the ESSER funds of 13. We received a total of 57.
Right.
So,
But this was a list, although it's not itemized, but this is the list of the areas where expenditures were.
Well, it says not planned, but I don't know if we actually used that money to pay for that stuff.
Right.
Because it gets earmarked, Diane, for specific things. You get a list of stuff that you can pay for with it and stuff that you can't pay for with it. So,
Right, so what I'm looking for is when I see a big expense item in the budget, let's say your computers, okay, your Chromebooks or whatever. And if we use that money to pay for those, we say we had a $40,000 expense, but we had $20,000 that came in from the state. I just wanted to see that kind of relationship between what it was used for.
That might be a little hard in this situation.
That's too hard. I mean, I don't want
I
you going.
totally agree with Diane, though, that we should never, ever be budgeting any kind of net amount. There should be clear, income and or revenue versus expenditures, because otherwise, A, you can't do an apples to apples comparison. And B, it looks like, you're trying to hide salary costs or something, which, don't want to say that's what's happening, but that's not clear. It makes it hard for people to understand it. So I think Diane's point is well taken. I think next year with the new structured accounting and account system that we'll have, because we're going to have a common accounting system between the school district and the town, I think it's just going to become a lot more clear. And that's just something Sherry will have the pleasure of working on over the next several months.
And I don't know how it's gonna roll up when we implementing this new system. Is it gonna start with the 21-22 budget year, or we're gonna have a phase in time? So I just want to make sure as we start the new fiscal year, whether we have that system up or not, that we're doing it apples to apples. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I
And
think
not
you have
having it.
You have one finance director, so I think
Right.
that's going to help, and
Yeah.
certainly something we can monitor going forward. But I have confidence that it'll be a little more clear to everybody, probably. As we start with this system, we all learn it together.
Sherry, go ahead.
If I could, our hope is that we start July 1. That's our hope, and that would be the ideal time to implement something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I have several different ideas of exactly what you're looking for in the details. And I think with the new software system, that will provide us with the details. Phoenix, the drawback of Phoenix financial software system, it never provided us with the details we needed. In using the system, you just had to delve deep into it. And then you had to produce a lot of Excel spreadsheets, to get to what you're looking for. I think with the new software system, we'll be able to do just that. And we'll be able to show you what our grant salaries are and what our regular salaries are. And there's ways of, tracking that thing so it's crystal clear to everybody that's looking at a document in front of them. So I do have a lot of very good ideas and ones that I've used in my past district. So, and that I had a board similar ask those kind of questions. So I'm hoping to implement that and maybe, take your suggestions certainly tonight. And we'll definitely have the details that you are looking for moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sherry.
You're welcome.
I'll shut up now so other people can ask questions.
Thank you.
Are there other questions related or for Valerie, or just kind of while we're on that topic and some of the updates she provided? Okay, so I guess I understand why that salary number didn't make sense, and it's unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is. Because again, it makes it impossible to really compare apples to apples, so kind of knowing what the actual expenditures were. But it's where we are right now. So let's, I guess, I'm done talking about that for now. Any members of the board, anything else for Valerie?
Mark, I would like to say, Valerie answered my questions from our last meeting. She sent me a bunch of documentation today, which was much appreciated. And it shed a lot of light on basically what I was talking about last meeting. So I do want to publicly thank her for that. And excuse me?
Anything specific you can share, or is it just more?
I'll send it to all the members, and they can look at it too, because it did answer my questions, and I'm more than satisfied with it. So
okay, all right.
Thanks again, Val.
All right, well, if there's anything else specific to the school or town budgets, that we want to hit up while we're here. I mean, it's really a segue, I think, at this point onto the item 3C on the agenda, which is discuss and act upon the proposed 21-22 budget. I think we have some questions. I want to say, just point out that we've already cut some money out of the budget. I don't know if anybody was paying attention, but since the school had budgeted $50,200 and the actual additional cost is only around $40,000, I think we're actually about $10,000 or so ahead. So we'll take it where we can get it. But we are going to need to get updated numbers. I don't know, Valerie, if you're going to go back to the board or work with Laura or Sherry to try to, modify that budget amount. But it seems to me that we could remove that amount for AHM that was budgeted from the school budget without any harm. Does that make sense to you?
If in fact they are billing you guys for what we had already put in the budget, that absolutely makes sense.
Okay. So, we'll want to plug that. Eric will have to answer the question about the RAM offset. And again, I'm talking to Laura Blake tomorrow. She has to have a quick meeting, so I'll ask her that specific question.
Yeah, while you were talking to Val, I emailed the superintendent and asked him for that, because I just pulled up the March 1 budget that they have, and that doesn't match what he sent me on March 1. But what I'm wondering is that he sent it to me in the morning and they had a budget meeting and then produced something else after that. So I suspect what's online is more current than what I have. It looks like that's that budget that's posted online. If that really is, if the 77,000 is not taken off of there, then that would be a further reduction of right around $20,000 from the budget number that's posted for RAM.
When you say the budget that's on there, there's a proposed budget, proposed admin budget adjustments file, and a proposed budget report. Is it one of those two that you're talking about versus the budget book?
So I had asked him just to send me what our levy is, and he sent me the information. He just gave me basically, you know, here's your final levy for this, here's your final levy for that. And I just added them up, and that's what's reflected in our budget. But that doesn't really match up to the operating and capital budget, you know, thing that the Region 8 budget that's posted. So I don't know. I mean, what I would say is that the RAM board is still going through their budget. And I think that the budget we have from them isn't final at this point anyway.
Right.
I mean, we can get a guess of a snapshot of where they are today, but ultimately, you know, we're a ways away from having, you know, any kind of approved, you know, or budget that they're willing to go to send a referendum, because they haven't had their public hearing yet either.
Okay. So again, more outstanding questions. We just don't have the information on where RAM is going to end up.
Right. And on the town side, there is a potential for, you know, we're looking at potentially combining a couple of positions right now. If we did that, that would result in a fairly significant savings. But it's still got to go through the whole union negotiation process. So we're a long way to come from coming to any, you know, final conclusion on that.
How long do you think that process is going to take?
Anybody's guess. I can't tell you. We could ram it through, but
I mean, we've got to present a budget to the town, so I don't know if it's, you know, something that's going to be realistic to put in there. And maybe you don't know that either. We don't need to answer the question if we don't know. So
yeah, I'm just telling you that there's a potential there, but it's, you know, we're nowhere near the point where we have a firm number on that at this point.
All right, thanks, fair enough.
Are there still specific questions with the budget, you know, as presented that's there? Does anybody have any questions about what's there on the town end that I can answer for you?
Yeah, I'd like to know about the in the past, we have supplemented the expenditures of the town from the you know, from the general fund, if you will.
Correct.
And the decision was made at the Board of Selectmen's meeting to not do that. There was some discussion over possibly allocating $100,000 from the fund to offset the taxation increase. And that $100,000 figure, I believe, came from a calculation of what a 10% fund level would be, which is kind of the target fund level. Is that correct, or am I correct on that?
So that is correct. Last year's budget, they chose to, we had, you know, based on the results of the audit, roughly 500,000 in excess funds from the unexpended fund balance. The Board of Selectmen made a decision to spend 420 out of that 500,000. So there was about $80,000 left that was excess over our, our capital reserve essentially.
Targeted about, yeah.
So there is that, and we know just because revenues last year were slightly ahead of projections and expenses, we were under budget, even with the money we transferred into the permanent or into the capital funds last year. So, I mean, I think you could safely transfer or count on about $100,000. It may be a little bit more, but that would be, I would really want the audit results before I counted on more than 100,000 of that. I think you could safely count on 100,000 though.
Got it. Good. Just want to make sure I understood where that number was and where that ended up coming from.
One of the other things that I was kind of looking at today, I was looking at a lot of different towns' budgets and things like that. And a lot of the towns are really tracking their COVID expenses very detailed and very separately. So they can actually see what percentage of their budget is being allocated to that. And I don't see us doing anything like that. And to me, I think that's a really important number for me to know. When I see things like, cleaning supplies, well, is that just normal stuff or is there increased stuff because of COVID or things like that? I think that detail is going to become important going forward, especially when we start getting all this money, we have to justify what we did. And I think it's really, I need to know when I look at this, what is a temporary expense and what's a long-term expense?
Right. So I can tell you on the town's perspective, all total, realistically, when we added up what we actually expended for COVID-related expenses, it was somewhere around $7,000 or $8,000 total. It was a pretty small value, but part of that is, we just elected, on the town's basis. If you think about what we really needed to do, we didn't increase any personnel costs by any means. I hand built all the plexiglass shielding for the town kind of in my spare time. Most of the PPE we got came directly from the state, from DEMS. So we had very little expense for that. So if you look at the expense that you could say is really directly related to COVID, the biggest single thing is probably the money spent by the registrars and the, directly related to voting. And so we are going to probably be over in the registrar's budget this year. And we're probably going to be over in the poll worker, the fund we pay poll workers and stuff like that out of. But it's not going to be a big amount. I mean, I would say we've been pretty frugal. And my guess is the town's going to get away with about $15,000 in extra spending because of COVID. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of expenses we haven't had because of COVID, and they basically balance out. Like, for instance, we haven't really been able to do any senior programming. We haven't sent, normally we would be sending, a bunch of employees would have been going to training, and a lot of that was reined in because it's just not offered. So I think net, the town's about even. COVID was neither a cost savings nor a cost, a big cost adder for the town.
What about the school side? I mean, that would be totally different.
Correct.
And I guess I would really like to see that we're keeping track of all those COVID items on the school side separate, so we kind of can put our hands on it. So if I see an expense increase in, say, cleaning, well, how much is that? Is regular cleaning or extra cleaning? Do you know what I mean? For COVID, do you know what I mean? Things like that.
I think it might be a possibility. It's gonna be very difficult to tease out of the current account structure,
Right.
unfortunately.
It's for me, it's been hard looking at the budget to look at these increased expenses and what's driving it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the detail's not there. You don't have it. You
Right.
just have it.
I don't have it. Right. And, I think hindsight is everything. We probably should make sure that going forward the next fiscal year, if we have a lot of COVID expense, that we're keeping track of it and being able to.
I'm really
going
hoping
forward.
the next budget year, we're gonna have basically zero COVID related expenses.
Yeah.
That may be a little optimistic, at least on the town's end.
Right.
Does anybody have any other specific questions for Eric? Or for Valerie? All right. Hearing none, I'm gonna suggest we move on to the agenda item, which is the, where do we go here? There it is. 3C, which is just to discuss and act upon the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. I mean, we've obviously already been doing that. We haven't really gotten to the point where we're, I think, zeroing in on any particular solution. As we all know, we've got a pretty significant increase in the school. We've got a significant increase in the town. It's not zero. It's not huge. And then we have an offset reduction from RAM, although we don't really know how much yet. One of the things that, and I'm just going to throw this up here for just a general, general review, is if I have calculated this correctly, which is always open for verification. One of the things that Rob had suggested, I think last time, was, okay, do we want to pull a target? Do we want to say, look, we don't think we can get a 7.58% increase tax through. It's just a lot to do. It's unreasonable. The townspeople are going to vote it down, or worse, come after us with pitchforks and torches. Do we have kind of a target that we would need to shoot for? I don't like to budget this way, but we also know we're living in reality. One of the things that I kind of worked up earlier today is, if we did look at various tax increase levels, what does that really mean? And this is where I think this ended up. Eric, this is based on your version 8 of the budget you provided last time.
Yep, okay.
So it could have some differentials. We just talked about, a couple $1,000s here and there. We need to understand what the RAM budget's really going to be. But this is kind of where we are. The various mill increase and that would result in a various percentage increase along this blue shaded line, and that might be hard for some of you to see.
That blue line is the percent mill increase?
No, that's the percent tax increase.
Okay.
That's the overall increase in taxes. Okay, if we did that, what would the mill rate be? Which is kind of what Eric did in his original mill rate calculation, was showed it in a similar fashion. There's different ways you can look at it. The current proposed budget is here. where are we? Yeah, so what that would be, you know, if you, this is proposed, but if we proposed that we were gonna try to accept, let's say, a 5% increase, if we thought we might be able to get that through the town, what would it take for us to get there? That equates to a taxation, total tax revenue level of 10,149,349, which means that somewhere in the current budget, we would have to find $250,000. So I thought that just by doing this exercise gave us at least an idea of the scope and scale of what we would need to target in order to try to hit some level of increase that's 7.58%. There's various ways we can do that. We just talked about the potential of safely using the fund balance of $100,000 that's not currently reflected in this budget. That is an option. Board of Selectmen opted not to include that in their budget for understandable reasons. Personally, I'd rather not have to do that. But again, we're facing a significant challenge this year. The school budget, we've already talked about, there's a significant increase out there. So I think we need to make some decisions about what's happening there. What's the impact if we were to reduce the school budget by a certain amount? We obviously know that we have a very high teacher to student ratio, or low student to teacher ratio, if you want to look at it that way. And that's one of the things that is appealing and attractive to Andover residents who have children in school. And we all know that. And this is a year in which it was a challenge. If you had more students per school, it would have been tough to keep everybody in. So I think we've all been through that quite a bit. And I don't know where we go from there. But I think that this at least gives us something to look at and try to understand the scope of the problem if we think that we're going to need to reduce this tax increase proposed. I'll send this to you guys.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just take that 5%, which I still think is too much of an increase, but for us to find $249,000 without using that $100,000, that's a tough nut. I don't think we can find it.
Well, not without some drastic cuts in services, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or some massive capital cuts.
Or some massive capital cuts. And we further kick that can down the road that we've been doing for 15 years. Or whatever.
Yeah. I'll just throw this out there that to the extent that we want to consider using fund balance for anything, in my humble opinion, it should be used for capital, not for operating expenses. I know that may be a distinction without all that much difference, but you know.
Well, if we were to use the fund balance and reduce capital expenditures considerably, then I think your distinction is an important one. You know, for all intents and purposes, that's what we'd be doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you took 100,000 and you threw it at capital, then you get to 150 in cuts to get to 5%. And by the way, I agree with you, Mark. Budgeting this way is kind of backwards, but you know, as I said, you know, kind of reality. You know, we have to ultimately produce a budget that is passable. So, you know, to me, my gut can lead us astray. So don't just listen to that. But 5% strikes me as kind of an upper bound level at which we can go to the town and expect to possibly pass something. Going to the town with a 6.5% increase, which is where we stand now, is
actually, we stand at 7.58.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Yes.
That's a definite no.
I mean, that's not even, yeah. So if you're at 5 and you can get there, I mean, 5's big, no question.
Yeah.
In 1 year to go up 5. I mean, it used to be, we used to kick around 1, 2. 5 in 1 year, okay. But if we could do that where only a portion, you know, we can throw some money at capital, fine. You know, this has been a long running issue. You guys know this. I probably know it better than some. that we have been throwing fund balance at capital for some time. We've also been underfunding capital for some time. And so, you know, it's an exercise in can kicking, but at the same time, you know, we somehow have to make this work. And so if we really do have about, give or take, you know, some dollars, 100,000 that we could potentially put into capital, part of me thinks that as much as I dislike spending on our fund balance further than where it is, I also dislike letting the town's infrastructure rot another year and then spending more to catch up. You know, Eric has a plan that I think is really good to get us current in our, you know, kind of our infrastructure. And the further behind we fall, the more expensive it ultimately is. So I can justify to myself anyway, throwing some fund balance at the capital budget. But I also think that if we do that, we also have to try to find some cuts to get us to, again, my gut is that the 5% figure is the place where we can target. And I grant you all that 5% is still a significant tax increase and it may not pass, but we're we're at 7.5. So, you know, and we all know how hard it is to cut money out of the town budget. If we can cut, I guess my feeling is, and this is not need based, this is just me trying to think of things. How do we get there? Maybe we can take it and think of it as a ratio. Like the town budget is 20 some odd % of the total. If we need to cut $150,000 out of it, out of our total budget, you know, then maybe that means that we need to cut $40,000 out of the town budget. We need to ask the Board of Ed to go back to the Andover education budget and cut X. And then we need to go to RAM and say, guys, we need you to work on this and we need you to come in lower. You know, in such a way we get to 5. I don't think that we can get to 5 just by cutting our town budget. I just don't even think that's possible.
Oh,
How are
no.
we gonna find 150, let alone 250?
Right, there's no way.
Not without eliminating the resident state trooper.
Did anybody see the
I'm sorry.
blow up on Facebook over that?
No, that's one of the reasons I left.
I'm not on Facebook, thank God.
One of the reasons I left Facebook.
100 comments on that thing.
Oh, good. I mean,
I can just tell you, I've been there
That would
before.
happen, right? We all said that last week. That was probably one of the first votes I took place in the town was about the resident state trooper. The residents made their opinion known very clearly at that time.
It's the third rail of Andover politics. The reality is that that's 150K right there, but people don't want to give it up. People want to pay for that. Yeah. And so, yeah, you know, that's how it works. Yeah. So, you know, I took a run at that. I'll take a run at it again with you guys if you want, but I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
It was a very emotional posting thing. It was very interesting to read through those.
I can also tell you that when I was on the board, the first time we tried this and we went to town meeting, obviously it's before COVID, we had a packed house in the town hall and the number of people who stood up and spoke, you know, and there were a variety of people. It wasn't just one demographic of the town. They had broad support. And, you know, ironically, that was the trooper that we had to get rid of. But the point is that the trooper program was heavily supported.
Yeah.
And when it went to a vote, I mean, it wasn't close.
Well, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't at least bring up the issue.
Right.
Oh, we should bring up the issue and we should probably lay it out for the taxpayers again, just to point it out. Like, look, we can get you here or we can get you here. But, you know, we took a run at this a few years ago with data, not just the budget data, but we actually did a deep dive into crime statistics and everything, and it had very little impact. So just FYI, I'm there with you guys if you want. I do think that given this sort of budgetary pressure that I would be on board with the rest of you if you wanted to go this route and try cutting it. I'm just saying I'm pretty sure how the town is going to react. That's all. I'm done.
Rob, I'm just gonna kind of ditto that. I remember that well. The only thing, if we're gonna go that route, is we need to frame it as, here's your option, town. You want to pay X, you want to pay Y. And don't hit them with data. We already tried that. I think we need to put it in the town's lap, but I think it's our job. I don't think we can sit here and say, oh, that was a difficult road to go down. We're not going down it again. I think our job is to look at the numbers, look at the budget, whether it's an easy decision or a hard one, and just present it to the town.
I agree with you. I feel like that's, part of what we did last time, and we got our answer. Maybe the answer will change, but we should put it out there as this is the specific differential. I remember, actually, Dave, you may remember this too. At town meeting, the specific question was asked. What exactly is the mill rate difference between trooper and no trooper? And when we answered that question, because I think Dan Warren answered the question at the time, people just shrugged, we're like, fine, we'll pay for that.
It was like $30, wasn't it? It was cheap.
It was less than half a mil. I forget what it
Yeah,
was.
it's less than half a mil, yeah.
Roughly
So,
0.18 mil.
Oh yeah, 0.2 mils, yeah. Exactly. So I was even high. So, the problem with it is, obviously, is that though it is a single large line item for our town budget, it's dwarfed by other parts of our overall budget.
Right.
But when we're trying to make the numbers add up, it looms large for us. And I get that. And I'm with you, Dave, that we should at least take it to the town as an option. How we frame that, having failed spectacularly last time, I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And out of emotional issue, it's a financial issue, but I know people will make it emotional. I can't, I'm not responsible for that. It's
ultimately, I agree with you, David. And ultimately, everything is an emotional issue. What are we willing to pay for? What do we value in our town? What do we think it's worth it? What's your risk factor? What's your tolerance for risk, right? So, you could say the same thing for the schools and for the roads and everything else. I don't know how we present it. I personally am loath to take this back to a town vote because I think we all know where that's going to go. But we could. We could. To me, that's maybe taking some time that we don't necessarily want to spend, but we could. The other thing is we could present a budget that has it in or has it out with has it in with a high tax increase or has it out with a low tax increase. And thereby we are doing the same thing with a referendum, making the decision a little harder because it's packaged within there, making it clear this is the impact. That's part of what the process really is, right? So, go ahead, Rob.
I feel like the thing we have to do is we have to do our level best to get where we need to go before messing with the trooper line item. And then that's our cherry on top to get to our final number, option. We have to look at everything else, do everything we can, and then say we're at 5.5%, and that gets us to 5. Okay. Then we try for it, or it gets us to 4.5, whatever it is. We got to do everything we can before that, because obviously, if we're going to bring that cut to the town, when we know full well that it's a valued thing, then we have to, honestly be able to tell people that we have absolutely gone through everything else, stripped out literally everything else we can that we think is responsible. Not that I think actually stripping anything out of the town budget at this point is responsible, but bear with me. And then say, okay, we did our level best. This is where we're at. Here we are with the trooper. Here we are without the trooper. Your call. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is to look at it as, our first choice.
Agreed.
I agree. I think we have to look at the school budget more and other things. And then that's like, the straw that breaks the camel's back, I guess, so to speak.
I don't know if it was Dave or Rob, somebody mentioned that, there was broad support for this. There wasn't one demographic, was really
That was me.
the state trooper, that wasn't, and that was my perception from that vote also. What we are going to not have is broad support for the school budget. So, we've got to justify whatever we present, it's got to be, provide the reasonable service to the town and, and the students and yet be responsible also. So that one's going to be an uphill battle. We know that. I mean, we've already heard it. We've heard it from residents. I think we all have a little concern. The Board of Selectmen certainly expressed a lot of concern. It's been difficult to tease out the actual costs, where they're going, everything. So that, I think, adds to the kind of the frustration and concern over it. I think very optimistic that we'll get past that going forward, but we are where we are right now. The school budget, I think we're going to have to take a look at it and kind of see what we think. I mean, there's really two approaches to that. We can look at the general expenditures and say, hey, we've got to find X amount to reduce. We've got to find a way to do that somehow. Or flatly, we just have to look at the staffing level, right? I mean, let's just call it as it is. The student to teacher ratio is low, and Valerie made some very clear arguments for why I think that it should be low, and that she and I had a conversation since, kind of outside the meetings. Just for her, it's very much a concern about cost avoidance in the future. That's the way I would characterize it. That her concern is because of the situation where we are in some of these classes, that we have the potential to have additional outplacement or additional services that are going to be required, which as we all know, if you follow this at all, those are not optional. If they become part of I don't know what is an IEP or whatever those requirements are. So that ends up becoming problematic for us.
Can I just throw something out there? But yeah, first of all, yes, outplacement's very expensive, so you do want to avoid that. A couple of years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, 2-3 years ago, we thought we were facing a massive budget crunch. We actually were saved in the end by Deus Ex Machina of a state budget that kicked the can. But at the time, we were really terrified that we were going to have $1 million shortfall, and we were scrambling. And at the time, we asked Sally what she could do. And when she came to the board that year, she came with like 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 was some kind of minor cuts. Scenario 2 was a reduction in specials and things like that. Scenario 3, it wasn't until you got to the really bad one where you started letting teachers go. And I agreed with that general approach, that the last thing I want to do is fire a teacher, especially somebody, an experienced, good teacher. They're actually not that, easy to find. If you need them back, you may not get them. So there was a sort of staged presentation that Sally gave that year. If we need to cut this much, here's what we could do. If we need to cut this much, here's what we could do. And here, if in the total disaster scenario, here's what we could do. And I kind of think maybe that would be a good framework to go at this. If we want to ask the Board of Ed to revisit their budget, we need to come up with a number we need to ask them for. And then they need to tell us, if that's the number, here's how we could get there without egregiously slashing services to our students.
Or we slash services, but this is the decision you make. That we're not cut slash.
Right. I mean, if we go and we ask them for $1 million, obviously,
this is the impact, right? So
correct. Here's how it would affect people, and I'm familiar with this, not only from past budget discussions, but obviously I have the 2 kids in the school. So, but that's sort of important information. It's also important information for the board and the board, both boards, Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. You know, when we take this to the town, then we have to explain to them why we arrived at where we arrived at. Well, we looked at these scenarios. You want a lower tax rate, that means firing 2 teachers or something like that. That's important information to know, so that we can give people that and say, look, that's the choice. This isn't, you know, because the school is buying some, you know, whiz bang thing, or we're building a new athletic field or something like that. We're talking about literally educating students, and here's where the money goes. So that's my gut, is that framework that our past superintendent used to bring to us and say, here's our levels, this is where we could go. If you absolutely need these cuts, this is where we could do it. We don't want to do this, but this is how we could do it if we had to, might be valuable. Just my thought.
I think we have to back into a number, a percentage number of what we think is a responsible increase in the school budget, and then come up with a dollar amount and let them find the cost savings, however they can find it, and let them make the decision. I mean, there's no way we're going to get around with this without reducing the school budget. It's too high.
And Diane, I would also say that if the board's intention is to do that with the town, you know, you do me the same thing. If you tell me what you need to reduce, you know, I'll take it from somewhere. It'll probably mostly be coming out of capital. But you know, if you
I'm
tell
not
me
in
what-
favor of kicking the can, because, you know, next year, the budget isn't going to be any easier. Do you know what I mean? We're going to be in the same place. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we are potentially right now talking about eliminating one more town hall employee. You know, but again, that's a union fight for that to occur. But that would provide a fairly large cost savings.
The other thing, and Valerie, you had indicated before that it is pretty clear to you that we would not remain at these staffing levels for the next budget year. Is that correct?
That's correct. This year, we already have eliminated for this new budget, 1 para position. And we have replaced that outgoing teacher with a teacher that's at a lower level. And we've already reduced the secretary position from 12 months to 10 months. So we did have staffing level changes going into the new, it was just no people lost their job that currently work there. So we did do that, but yes, I told you from here going forward that, you know, we'll obviously hope that we don't have an increase in special ed kids or things like that, but it was not my intent after this year to keep both kindergarten and grade 3 with that extra class. So that, yes, that is correct.
And well, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you expect some attrition there?
We did actually with, if you looked 4 years out, within those 4 years, so I don't know if it's going to be 2 in a row or 1 and then none and then 1, there should be 2 more staff members within the 4 years leaving. So if the enrollment stayed the same, then that would be those 2 classes.
All right. So it doesn't change the picture for next year, but I think it does provide a context for kind of for the future. You just brought that up because Diane said it's not going to get any easier next year. I'm actually hoping it will be, but none of us knows.
I'm thinking about building a senior center, so that's where I'm thinking it's going to be the
Well,
next fall.
You know,
It's going to happen next year. So
without a significant increase in taxation, that's not going to happen either unless we get bonding.
right. So I mean, it's going to be tough with that issue coming up next year. So
And we all, like, most of us feel pretty strongly that's something we have to take a hard look at. It's another significant issue in this town, is having a good community center where that, could be a senior center and provide those other
Right.
services. All right.
I think, Mark, if I think we already put that out in the forefront, that it's the number one issue that we have to take care of in this town, because they've been put off for 40 some odd years. So as far as the senior center goes, but I'm kind of leaning towards what Dave Hewitt had said. We need to, as a board, I think we need to reach a spot where we think we should be. Figure out what percentage that is, but I think we should also educate the townspeople. Put the things out there. Do we cut the capital budget? Do we cut the school? Do we cut the resident trooper? Do we cut this or that? Feel the pulse of the town first. I think we have time to do that. It's gonna have to happen soon, but somehow between us and the Board of Selectmen, come up with some type of survey or whatever.
How do you, yeah, that's the thing I would struggle with. I agree with you. I would love to know, okay, if you could put this to the town today, who's going to vote on this piece? Who's going to vote on that piece? Where, but it's tough to get that information. I'm not sure how we.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm working with the town of Colchester right now on part of what they're struggling with and what they're looking at, and they sent it out early to the townspeople. Early meaning probably a month ago. They're looking at a $12 to $14 million senior center that needs to be built right away, and they're also looking at close to $5 million worth of fire apparatus. That's why I'm involved in it, and they sent a survey out, showing the need for those two items on top of their regular operating budget, which shows an increase, which covers the rest of the town of Colchester, but. You'd be surprised how the survey was answered by every person in town, pretty much. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of answers, and most of them were affirmative. They know they have to bite the bullet for these two major expenditures. The number one, take care of the seniors, and take care of their first responders. And that's. It was really, they did a pretty good, mailer or whatever, but.
It was a mailed survey?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Or did you hop online with it and answer the questions? But a good portion of the town, the seniors, the school supporters, the fire departments, and police supporters, and everybody else came forward and answered a question. And what I read, it looks good for both going to be able to pass with probably a tax increase. So we need to educate the people right now, and like David said, put them all out there. Here's what we're looking at. Do we cut Eric's budget? Do we cut the fire department capital equipment? Do we cut other capital equipment?
I think to make that work, you'd have to have a very specific issue. So I could see where that would work for like a senior center funding or capital for the emergency services, or for a state trooper, or.
But the questions they pose to the people involve the entire budget, the entire Colchester budget, not just those two items. Is the budget too high? Do you support the senior center? And it would across the board. School. I mean, they had a thing in there. Do you think the school budget's too high? And the people answered it. And I think the Board of Finance there got a good idea of what the people are willing to pay for. So that's
It
just
would be great to get that information, but remember those surveys we tried to do last year online? We didn't get a whole lot of good. I mean, we got a basic information. Remember how we struggled with the increases last year, and and I guess it's all, like you said, all in how you word the questions and how you gather the information, because it can't be narrative. It's got to be yes, no kind of stuff, so you can really tally and do a statistical analysis. And
their entire survey is online, and that's where I saw it. Because I do follow the,
Joanne posted a comment that it was all online, yeah.
everything's online and all the answers are shared online. So that's what I got. All
I mean, my only comment to piggyback on that is if we go that route and we want to do something like that, we have to publicize it in some way. You know, a lot of what we always struggle with is participation.
Right.
Wasn't Eric working on that? Eric, weren't you working on that a couple weeks ago? A letter that you're going to post in the newspaper?
I gave the letter to both you and the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen said they wanted to modify it before publication, but they have not actually done it yet.
Because I did suggest on there what you're speaking of, to really kind of comprise it up where you have questions at the very end, very specific questions for townspeople to say, do you feel that we should, for example, reduce the Andover budget, the school budget, things like that, and then to channel that into the town somehow. So we know ahead of time what some of the townspeople are thinking.
Well, I mean, that in a sense is why we have a budget meeting, you know.
Which people don't come to.
Well, but people don't vote either. I mean, let's be honest.
Nobody could come last year, so maybe they'll come.
Budget.
There are a couple ways to address that. First of all, number one, at the town meeting, you're right. You know, not everybody attends, but you know, you put a 5% tax increase on the board, and you'll boost participation. Number two,
absolutely.
You know, part of our problem is that this process happens in the spring. You know, people are used to making their big decisions in the fall with our regular, bigger elections. So we're sort of mismatched, and that's an issue. And I don't know, that's an issue we can get around given the fiscal year. But, what I would just say is it's useful to a point to have somebody give a yay or nay. Is the school budget too high, too low, or just right? But that tells you something, but it's not exactly like you're not putting in front of a voter and this is something you could do at a town meeting. Okay. If you think it's too high, in order to cut it, we have to do this. Not we, by the way, Board of Ed, but in order to cut that, that means you have to reduce this, or you have to consolidate classes, you have to do whatever. And that's the nitty gritty where, step two comes into play.
Yeah,
you might get your answer that people think the school budget is too high, but then where do you go?
I think you have to do exactly what you said, Rob. You need to phrase the question such that the proposed budget includes this. Okay. Yeah. It's a significant increase. Here are two options. You could, we could reduce, you could eliminate a teaching position, but the impact is X, Y, and Z, and your net benefit would be approximately $30 per person, right? I mean, that's kind of how you presented it ultimately for the state trooper.
Mark, the one thing I would caution you on is the school board, makes the decision on what they do with the budget.
Right.
You obviously have bottom line authority, but you can't say cut a teacher versus not.
Absolutely, but I totally envision anything like this going out as a co-effort of the school board, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance. So it would be the kind of thing I think where Rob made this point, like you say, hey, or somebody, Dave, we would go and say to okay, Board of Ed and Valerie, if we need you to cut 75,000, what's the impact? If we need you to cut 150,000, what's the impact? If we need to cut 250,000, what's the impact? And then we could, from that point, we could construct something that logically presents those impacts to the town. And we would do the same for the state trooper issue. I think that's the golden opportunity to put that before the town without having a lot of delays or another vote or some kind of town meeting, that we say, hey, we can eliminate the state trooper position. This was, widely popular 3 years ago, but it's the single high expense line item in the town that would probably, may have an impact on the services, whatever, however we present it. We can provide, would you be in favor of reducing the unexpended fund balance in order to offset a tax increase, despite the fact that this means further down the road, we're still going to have to catch up to the infrastructure. So we could construct questions in that manner that would hopefully not be either leading or that would be clear about what the impacts are. I think it could be done. That if we were going to do that, I think that's the kind of thing we would do, to make it clear to each topic, this is the impact. This is the mill rate impact. This is the dollar impact on average per household. And then people have a context by which they can make a decision. It's just information. We're not going to get everybody responding, but it might be a way to do it.
And if we do it, I do think we have to pick like 2 or 3 things. You can't overload people. It has to be some discrete
Got to be
stuff.
very concise, right? It has to be simple.
Well, I think that's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think the way we do that is as Eric said, we go to him and we say, all right, find me $50,000 or $100,000. We go to the Board of Ed and say, find us $50,000 or $100,000. And then we come up with our three items, or whatever it is.
Right.
Like Rob said, we have to come up with the increase and back into it and then throw the numbers back and then see what comes back out.
That's right.
Mark, how about, and I don't think we haven't done it yet, how about a letter from the Board of Finance along with a Board of Selectmen to each board and commission in town and says, we're looking at this major tax increase. Do you have any fat in your budget? And everybody does. Don't tell me they don't, that you can cut for now, that, and I mean, instead of us painting the hall at the firehouse, put that off for a year, things like that under building maintenance. And where can you help us with savings in your budget, and see what the boards send you back. I mean, that hasn't been done yet. And we used to get them all the time at the fire commission. It was 0 increase this year. So plan that way. And that was even prior to the budget season starting. But let's go back to each board and commission and say, hey, we're looking at this. What can you help? How can you help us? In the regular budget. They may come back, of course it'd be up to the entire board, but they may come back and says, well, we'll put off this purchase this year, because we can, and that would reduce our, even our capital or even our operating budget per se. So
yeah, I think something like that may be of value. And one of the things that I think we need to be careful about, or where we might be able to gain some traction, is that departments will often do contingency planning. I don't know if that's the case with the town departments. I don't know how much of it that's the case with the RAM. I don't know how much of it's the case with the Board of Ed. But we have a fund, right? We have a contingency fund that if we needed to tap, we could, in theory, do that, right? So we would. I'm throwing this out there, so I'm looking for some input. But there would be we could potentially go to them not only and say, look for things you can put off till next year, but also, don't plan for contingencies. If it turns out you budget very tight and you need to overexpend, we'll deal with it then. That's not necessarily a bad way to do it.
No, basically let's throw out the 7.5% increase that we're staring at right now and say, what can you do with boards and commissions? What can you do to help us reduce that? Because it's not going to fly. When we go back to the drawing boards back then, do we ask them now or do we ask them later after it gets turned down? And throw out the resident troopers. I mean, that idea of getting rid of them again. Throw out you would really want to chop the school board, amount and things like that. They may be able to do something within their regular operating budget to reduce their overall costs. Same with the Board of Fire Commissioners. Same with the planning and zoning and everybody else in town. I think we need to reach out to every board and commission first to ask, how can you help? And there isn't a one of us that can't go through the budget again and see where we may be okay.
We could start with ourselves. We've got a $4,200 line item for the Board of Finance.
There you go.
In 3 years, 4 years, right?
Right, there you go.
Can I ask a quick question of Eric?
I think that should be done sooner than later. Personally.
Contingency, we just brought up the contingency. Remind me, contingency for the town is usually what, 50, 75, something like that?
It's
Right.
$50,000, so.
Yeah.
And how much did we
contingency
use?
Represents about 1.4% of the budget.
What did we use this year?
Not this year, we're not, well, we're probably not gonna need to tap contingency this year. We didn't
I feel like we used some last year.
tap last year. The year before, we didn't, but we didn't because we went back for supplemental appropriation for a couple of different, for three things. Actually, the last 2 years, we've gone back to the town for supplemental appropriation, one for IT, and the year before for the emergency truck replacement and the replacement of the old backhoe with the loader. So the last 2 years, we did it by, we didn't use contingency, but we burned the, we burned a supplemental appropriation from the unexpended fund balance.
Okay.
And I would say too that, you know, one of the things I thought we ought to consider, and it wouldn't do us any good this year, but we ought to set the contingency up as a permanent fund. So if you don't use contingency and you maintain that contingency money, you use it from subsequent budgets.
You just roll it.
Right, essentially. Yeah.
You have a target percentage amount that you just work with.
Yep.
Budget goes down, we got lucky, we okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the things that, you know, in terms of large expenses that are very hard to predict, I mean, the biggest thing from the town's perspective is what your winter snow removal costs are going to be, which that budget, the snow removal alone is $100,000 budget, but then it also adds a lot to your maintenance. So it's really, you can think of snow removal as about $125,000 expense to the town, but that's highly variable. It's been, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we went way over in snow removal. The winter before this one, you know, was very mild and we went way under, and we plowed that basically into purchasing capital equipment because we had it. This year, we're in really good shape right now. The only thing that's really problematic is that the state has basically thrown one of the two major salt distributors in the state off the New Haven or the New London pier. So salt costs in the last month have gone from around $63 a ton, which is what we're locked into, to a lot of towns right now are paying over $100 and trucking it themselves. So that's one of the things that's nobody really knows. That's one of my concerns for next year, is if we really were stuck with paying $100 a ton and we had a winter even the same as this year, we would be way over in salt. Now we're going to spend the rest of this year's salt budget, and we're going to pack away as much as we can in the shed to give us a little bit of slack on that next year. But that's one I'm nervous about.
That's a perfect example of where having a contingency fund helps level that out.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
You budget it at what, $100,000 every year. You've got 50,000 sitting in a contingency fund, maybe not earmarked for that, but giving you the cushion. And then if you only spend 80, boom, maybe that extra 20 goes into that contingency fund.
Yep.
Or if it's fully funded, we we move it to a capital somewhere, improvements or something. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is something I wanted to bring up to the board, not necessarily at this meeting, but I think the board ought to explore, eventually going to a capital fund, putting contingency in a capital fund so that once it's funded, then you don't have to put more money into it. Just like right now, we're putting money in this year into the employee retirement payout fund, basically. Because the way the contracts are, the union contracts are, if you retire and you've got a ton of sick days, you can cash in a quarter of them, we haven't put money in that in quite a while, but the last 2 years, we've depleted a fair amount of money from that. So this year, we're gonna have to put money into it. And that's just a permanent fund that's sitting out there. I would consider doing the same thing with contingency. It will not help us this year, but it can potentially help us in future years.
It's a good idea. It's definitely worth exploring. Okay. Well, I think we've got some good ideas, although we haven't made any decisions. Kurt, I like your idea of just going back to the boards and various things and just making clear what our situation is and seeing if we can get any movement. Personally, I look at the Board of Finance line item. That's primarily, I think, for legal opinion backup. We haven't spent much over the last couple of years. We could cut that by $3,000 probably at the drop of a hat. The risk is we might need to use it, but you know what? We find a way to get it happen. To get it done and to make it happen if we did need it. It was a debate whether we even needed it before in our budget. So my view, I think what Kurt's suggesting makes sense. I still think we might want to consider finding a way to take the town's, overall, if we can get some type of consensus on where they are and what, on each of these particular line items. But that probably should follow if we do what Kurt's suggesting.
I think the letter should come from yourself, Jeff McGuire and Eric, to all the boards and commissions.
And Shannon.
Oh, yeah, Shannon too.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
And maybe Ram from the Ram Board of Ed, but we'd have less control there.
Right. Let's start with the in-town boards and commissions and see what we can get out of that.
Other thoughts and suggestions?
So if we do the letter, then meanwhile, we have to really kind of then work on what the backwards budget, I call it backwards budget, what number is a doable number and come up with a dollar amount of what we need to find.
Right, correct.
I think that makes sense. Again, Eric, if you can send the updated budget spreadsheet that you have, we'll answer the question about the RAM reimbursement, whatever it's called. Make sure that we have that data correct and try to have some reasonable estimates of what the RAM expenditures are going to be. And I'll update what I just did here if you guys find that helpful to show, hey, if we have these are our different tax increase levels, this is what we've got to cut from that current thing. I think it just kind of provides a little bit of a scope, context for it. So how hard do we really have to go at this? And I'll distribute that to everybody, but I think you're right. We have to think about that, Diane. As Rob had suggested originally a couple of meetings ago, find a target number that we think might be workable, and then we'll work from that and see if we can get somewhere with it. So there's really multiple prongs. One is looking at the budget exactly, from that perspective. Two is going back to the departments and the boards. And then three is concurrently coming up with a mechanism to try to gauge the town's residents' perspective on each of these key items. Because I think you're right, there are going to probably be 2 or 3 key items that are going to be hot button items. The school's obviously one. We know the state trooper is a very, you know, topical issue or a hot emotional issue. But I think it's incumbent upon us, as I think what Dave and others said, just to, we have to, it's our job to put it out there again and let make people understand what the impacts are. So there's probably these three approaches. We work on all three things simultaneously, and then hopefully we can come back and things may start to gel. Where are we getting close? And we're gonna have to make some hard decisions at some point. But I think if we start from those 3 points and move ourselves down the road, we'll be in a better position to kind of really know where we are and what more work we have to do. That would be my take on it.
I think we need lots of budget workshops.
Yeah.
Well,
It's on
I
the
think we
agenda.
need quite a few more meetings.
we are gonna need.
This is gonna be a tough one.
Yeah. And
I think this is harder than last year. So,
Last year, you didn't actually have to go back to the public, you know, you were able to just do it.
right.
well, that wasn't the reason it was easier last year. Last year was easier because none of us wanted to take. We were planning for a hard budget year, but
Right.
we weren't willing to do that to the residents in a COVID environment, in a pandemic environment. So we
Where they
backed
couldn't vote,
off.
right.
And now we're having to pay that price a little bit, but it was the right thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, as a board, we have to kind of come to a meeting of the minds for what our target is. That's really where we need to go, in my opinion. And we got to pick a number.
Yeah.
I think I'll put my little thing out because I think 5 is, like you said, is at the top. I think we gotta look at 4 and 5. I mean, realistically, even I think 4 may be hard, but
Yeah.
I don't know if we went under 4, if we can ever find the money. So that's the whole thing.
I agree. I'm in that same space, you know, that 5% it was my gut level target. You know, and we take it to the town. If that fails, we have to go back to the drawing board, but we shoot for 5 and see if we can get to 5. Let's see if we can get to 5 and then bring it to the town and say, we got to 5 by doing all of these things. If you want more, we got to cut more. And what do you want to do?
Yeah,
So that's my take. That's my gut. That's still a huge, you know, in the context of what this town has done in the last 10 years, that's still a big number, but it's, you know, it's not 7.5.
Right.
So can we find 2.5 or 2.6% in this budget? That's my take.
Well, I mean, the first thing is, you know, I would suggest me personally, I would suggest what I suggested to the first selectman and the chair of the Board of Finance already, which is go to RAM and be very blunt and say, you guys are out of control. You know, you need to cut your budget significantly. And if you don't, the town is going to be forced to pursue breaking the RAM charter, which is not in any of our best interests. So you're going to have to bring it down. You know, I would have done that a couple of months ago at the beginning of their budget process.
So right now the RAM budget increase is 2% in the March 1 packet, I think is what I read.
Yeah, I mean, the budget to Andover is basically flat.
Right. But their overall budget increase is 2%.
Right.
It's our little compact here, our little levy that's killing us.
Well, actually, the levy got better this year.
Right.
Last year was, you know, we went up some $300,000 with a level budget because our portion of it jumped. So we've come down slightly from that, and it's helped, but it's not, you know, it's not ideal. But, you know, they face the same challenges everybody. Education's expensive. Life's expensive. Nobody wants to pay taxes. I don't.
I still don't follow how they're aren't they going down 70 students or something, and they still really didn't cut any positions?
I think that's Eric's main point.
Yeah.
And I know Adrian and others have brought that up at different points, is that, you know, enrollment has dropped and we haven't seen a decrease in the costs. And we all know it's not always that simple. It's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. We all know that, but
No.
there needs to be a recognition and a movement towards it, or a darn good reason why it isn't happening.
Right.
Anybody know just off the top of your head, if RAM came in at 1% instead of 2%, what that saves us?
Well, it depends on what the levy number is, but our levy is from RAM appears to be
What, 17.13%?
it's it's $5.2 million. So if they dropped it 1%, you know,
It'd be 52,000. Right?
Well, 1%, I'm saying like a 1% increase as opposed to a 2% increase. Not
Right,
necessarily
right,
1% decrease in the total budget. I don't know if that's the same number.
So the budget's like $30 million, their budget somewhere.
Okay, so if the increase,
the net expenditure is $603,000, so it's basically 20% of that. So it's you know, 150,000. They can stop it.
Cut that in half. Okay. Yeah, there's your trooper.
We won't get $200,000 out of that.
No, but you know, what I'm saying is like a 2% increase on its face.
It's $100,000 basically.
Yeah, it doesn't sound crazy, but it's in the context. It's the
Right.
context of the enrollment. But
oh no, I take that back. It would be about 50,000.
52,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's not a lot. I mean, I guess the other question is, what do we want from RAM?
I'd like to see him stay flat, but I mean, that's just off the seat of my pants. I haven't looked at the.
Last year was flat, right? Their budget was 0 last year, I thought.
Was it flat?
I thought
It was flat. However,
But our
levy went
But
up.
ours went
our
up
levy
because
went
of our,
up. Yeah, our
yeah,
levy went up. So
that's right.
Now they're
Yeah,
going
more
up and their
students.
levy's flat, but they're still losing 90 students.
right.
And they're increasing their budget. That's what and they've been doing that, you know,
Have you?
consistently. And at one point they did trim a fairly good trim of staff. But then it leveled out, you know, and to me, it just, you know, it's the same thing. If you look at their cost, you know, the cost basis to the town for education, it's really up there. You know, and you know, again, RAM provides a really good education. You know, it's a really cool, you know, bling bling building. Be a nice building to work in, no question. It's just simply a question of does the town, you know, want to can the town afford to keep paying for that? That's the voters. That's, you know, the education budget, that's not my bailiwick. The only thing I have to say about is the town budget, you know, is the town, you know, town spending.
Is the RAM referendum voting before our referendum, or is it like the same week in May? Does
It's
anybody
before
know?
ours, but it's not a lot before ours.
Okay.
Do we anticipate any more monies coming from especially what's going on right now? They're talking about more funds coming through.
So there, if you look at the number that came from CROG, the town of Andover looks like it's going to get $319,000 spread over 2 fiscal years. So, roughly $160,000. However, you cannot use that to offset taxation. The only infrastructure spending they authorized was
Water, sewer.
And telecommunications, which does us zero flipping good. I was looking at that and I was wondering what we could actually even potentially spend the money on. It's actually kind of annoying because from the town's perspective,
We can't spend the money on anything because we haven't had any loss of revenue because of COVID. It's really tied to that.
That is part of our problem.
Yeah.
We did not lose any revenue.
Can it be channeled to the schools? Do they have to show that there's been a loss? No?
No.
Okay.
It could be channeled, I think, if because we had more social services expense, maybe.
That was the one area I was wondering
But you
whether
have to
we
keep
could.
the records. The record keeping is going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering whether we could expend that money against AHM. And I also, but I don't know. I mean, the devil's in the details and we don't know any details at this point.
Right.
Maybe for the outplacement, if they anticipate that coming up, because that's social services
It has
related.
to be caused by COVID. It can't be, and you have to be able to prove it. You have to be able to prove it. You know what I mean? You can't just say, well, I think this is why.
I mean, that would be on the social workers' plate to prove it.
Right.
And I think something like that could be proven based on what a lot of kids are going through right now. So I'm just wondering if that would be maybe something that they could possibly use. I don't know. I can't
remember if social services was included. It was all seemed to be tied to loss of revenue, loss of funding due to COVID.
Acceptable use of funds to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality. To respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID, public health emergency crisis by providing premium pay to eligible workers that are performing such essential work, or to provide grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such local government due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to its revenues collected in the fiscal year prior to the emergency, or to make investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. I mean, honestly, this is the stupidest freaking thing I've seen in terms of, the first time I read that, I'm like, woo, we're getting money. And then you read
good. We're giving you money, but you can't spend it. Yeah.
Right. And then what do you actually spend it on?
Well, I would think first responders, if there's something in there, right?
I wonder if we can get more clarification on that. Is there like can we
we'll get it eventually, but I mean, this is the big picture bill. The devil will come out in the details produced by committee at some point, and there'll be clarification. So, I mean, we've only known this for a couple of days, so I don't know what, who knows?
It's going to be tough to factor that into this budget process, probably. Get some very clear clarification on it.
Right.
So Eric, I agree with you about the RAM budget. We probably need to look at that, just taking a run through it. It appears that a lot of the increases, there's a significant increase in the salary costs, and part of that's contractual. They did sign a new contract. Part of it's benefits. There's a significant impact in benefits. We know that happens. But they're both certified and non-certified staff, and administration costs have gone up. And when you have a reduced student population, that I think needs to be explained. So anyway, that's just kind of my, first overview of some of that. And I think it's worth asking those questions. So, okay. Any other questions or specific comments, ideas, approaches?
So do you have, I guess the question is, what do you want from me? I mean, if you want to look at different reduction levels in the town and say, where would that come from and what you would want, I can put that together for you. You just tell me, what dollar values you're looking to recapture potentially. And I will give you what I think the best mechanism for achieving that if you have to, and then talk about what we won't do as a result. And I'm more than happy to do that if that's where you want to go with this. Similar to what we did last year when I showed you what, kind of a minimally reduced, a medium reduced, and a wicked reduced budget would look like.
So the current increase you have in your overall budget is 72,477. So if you took it to zero increase, you have to find $72,000.
Oh, 72. Yeah. Okay. I thought you said 42. All right.
Yeah, 72. Sorry.
I was
The
tempted
print
to
is very
say-
small here.
I was tempted to say, could we ask you to find 50?
Because
if you find 50 there, and you find 100 somewhere else, and we take 100 from fund balance, we throw it at capital, we're at 250, that gets us to our 5%.
Right.
That's kind of where I was going with it. Can you find 50, Eric?
I mean, sure. I could find 500,000. It's a question.
Sure,
of
you
what
shut
you
down the
want
transfer
back,
station and close everything.
We just don't plow the roads next year.
No,
That's
just
$100,000 right
For
there.
everybody at the town hall, don't have a town clerk or anything.
No, I mean, look, I get it. It's an ugly budget year. We all make no bones about that. And if you tell me that, what you think is responsible is looking at trimming the overall town budget by 50,000, or whatever the number you decide, I will bring you back a budget that accomplishes that. And then we can talk about, what has to happen to do that. That's all I can do, I mean, if you tell me that's what you want, that's what you'll get back.
Well, I think every board and commission should look at that, not just have the, come right out of your budget, 50,000 or whatever. Let's see what comes back from each board and commission first on what they can live with for the next upcoming year. Without really cutting services. I mean, Fire Commission has a zero increase budget this year, but that doesn't mean we can't put some things off that we had planned to do with our zero increase budget. I'm sure they can, between the five of us, we can find some savings for the year just to try to help out. And I think every board and commission should be asked that, not put the whole, everything on top of you, Eric, or, you know, I mean, just see that there's gotta be, you know, you gotta get something back. So, you know, but it kind of sounds, like we're deciding on the 5% increase to send to the town. So let's try to strive for that. First and foremost, though, let's see what we get back from the different boards and commissions.
I mean, remember though, most of the boards and commissions don't control much in the way of budget. You know, like, I mean, beautification has a couple $1,000s.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the larger boards and commissions in general. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, I think that Kurt is right, and I think the 5% is probably a reasonable target for us to do as a board overall. I'm a little hesitant to prejudice any particular group,
right,
by saying, hey, give this 5%, see if you can find it. Because honestly, if you tell them, look for 10, you know, I mean, maybe it's not realistic, but, you know, maybe they can find 6 or 8. And there may be departments that, you know, you look and say, yeah,
you do any.
Yeah, I don't know what you want from me. You know, are you going to do this or we're not? We have to do this job. So there's that possibility. If we're looking at a 5% increase, or I'm sorry, a limit our tax increase to 5%, leaving aside the fund balance right now, and proportionally allocating that, it's about 100,000 to RAM, it's about 80,000 to AES, and it's about 70,000 to the town. So that might be reasonable targets to try to get to, or to suggest. Let's see what we can do and see what the impact is. That might be one way to approach it, but I do think that we need to go back through it and just say, look, eliminate contingency. We'll take care of a contingency through another mechanism if we need to, right? We have balances that we can handle. We'll find that way to happen. But I think with the Board of Ed, we probably need to try to provide a target, and that's an aggressive target of 80K. But I think, and we're probably not going to get the 100K out of RAM, but I think we need to push them, as Eric said. You know, and Eric's going to have a tough time finding 70K without capital improvements challenges. But, you know, I think it's worthwhile doing what Kurt suggested, which is going out there and saying, look, you know, we've got to find a couple hundred, our budget is just way beyond what we're going to submit. So you try to find it, to help us out. Let's work together, try to get this reduction in place. Because otherwise what's going to happen is the board's going to make those decisions. You know, so I'd rather have it happen at the superintendent's level, and I'd rather have it happen at Eric's level, and even more at the department level. Say, look, you know, I can give you another, you know, 2% here or something, and that helps or whatever, you know, but ultimately we're going to have to make that decision, and we'll get input from the town for it. But I think that's where we're going to end up. It's much better to give people some guidance and see what they can do.
And then we need to know that before we go to fund balance, if we're going to look at fund balance.
Yeah, none of us wants to use fund balance.
That's the last. Really, that's the Rubicon. That's the last thing. Yeah.
And I mean, I think to stay away from fund balance, we got to ask the school for at least 100. 80 is not going to cut it.
Well,
their increase is still going to be too much.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to hit AES too hard. You know, I like the idea of going at what Mark laid out there was sort of proportional. I like the idea of, here's our target. We're asking for proportional cuts to your budget. We're not trying to beat up one entity more than another. You know, and I grant you that we have the least control over RAM, and that's going to be the hardest hurdle.
Right.
But I'm a little hesitant, I mean, especially with AES having come in with steady or cut budgets for, I don't know, recent memory, basically. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of that 70, 80, 100 breakdown. Personally, I think that's a good starting point to ask. And obviously, look, we don't have control over the ed budgets. We can only ask. So,
Well, direct control over the.
that's what I mean. We don't have direct control.
Right.
We can
Right,
ask.
but
them
you're gonna
to-
ask Eric to give you a 0 budget increase? So you ask for 8.
We're going to ask him to do his best in that regard.
Then
see what
I
it
think
does.
you ask the school to
see what
do
it
a little bit
does.
more.
But he could come back and say, look, I can get you 70,000 in cuts, but here's what it means. And we can balk at that. We can look at that and say, ugh, that's not okay. We're kicking the can too
This
much.
approach- Yeah. This approach does have the downside that if we think one budget came in very lean and another budget came in heavy, RAM or we think AES might be a little heavy, it doesn't adequately, or it doesn't allocate evenly necessarily the pain. That's a matter of opinion about where those budgets come in, but I'm just pointing out that fact.
That's true.
We're assuming that they're all evenly, the pain is spread evenly.
The presented budgets are all reasonable, and therefore we're
Right.
asking for proportional cuts. I know what you're saying. I get it.
I mean, what's hard for me is not having the detail, asking me to make a decision based on, I'm gonna guess, because, I'm pretty comfortable with the town numbers. I think they're tight. Do you know what I mean? But I can't say that about the school budget. Because I can't see it. I think there's some things in the school budget that can be done.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's not true for every budget. It just depends on what the impact is.
And it's kind of, absent of information, it's hard to make decisions
Right.
that are.
It certainly, and we can certainly set as a target. We can certainly ask AES to give us some impacts, and it doesn't have to be find us $150,000 or $100,000. It can be tell us what the impact is if you lose 75. Tell us what the impact is if you lose 125. Tell us what the impact is if it's 150. So that's part of what we're kind of where we were before. Because I
guess I just don't want to throw, I agree with that. I like the impact thing because throwing out one number only lets, you only work towards that one number, but we should be working back. Let's make it as tight as we can get it because it's going to be hard to get there.
Yeah. And ultimately, the people that decide are going to be the residents, right? So we just.
Yeah, it's going to be tight to get to 5%. And I don't even know if 5% is going to pass referendum, but we'll at least can put out a good budget.
Right. And we give people the opportunity to vote on it.
Right.
So I guess that, we can, and I don't know that we even need to necessarily take a voter necessarily on it, but I think that as an action item, I'll take the action of working with probably Jeff, and Shannon and we can construct that letter we talked about earlier, and Eric is saying, look, we need to, we need to go back and revisit the budget and look for anything that you think can be put off or a contingency that you might have had padded slightly just in case. Take that out so we'll address it if you need it later. So that I think we can go ahead and do. As far as we'll ask for that from the town. I think Valerie probably needs some guidance from us in terms of what we think we want, what are the levels that we think we want them to target. Like I said, 81,000 is roughly the proportional amount. But if we want to say, give us the impacts for $75,000 reduction for, $100,000 and $150,000, that's, those are ways we can do that.
Well, I guess you look at it this way. Do you want to put one number out there and they do all their work and then comes back and that doesn't do it, we go back? I like the 3 scenario options.
Yeah,
Give me some options and
Right.
It's all done at once and we can
I
kind
do
of work with it.
in our business all the time,
Right.
let's find out what the real opportunities are if volumes increase or something like that, because sometimes things surprise you, and there might be a sweet spot where we think it's acceptable, but we don't want to go beyond that because it's just not going to be a good scenario. So
Right.
Right. And that brings me back to the, Sally presentation years ago, here's what we can do without cutting a teacher. Here's what we can do, but if you ask us for this much, it means all of a sudden now we're into staff reduction. And I, for one, and I think the board at the time was united in this, we really didn't want to go there. I don't want to cut teachers, and most people don't. I think even most town members who think the budget is high don't want to do that. So we look at what we can look at. And if we can get partway there, even, it's still helpful. It's still useful exercise.
I mean, and the flip side of the coin is it's not just expense reduction. Try and find revenue. Is there a way to increase the tuition for pre-K? Do we, Hebron just increased their pre-K tuition this year.
I think if they thought about that stuff, they probably would have already put it in there, but
I don't know if it's late at this point to put it in, but when I put my kids through the Andover pre-K, we did pay, but I think the fees may have changed since then. It's been a while. My youngest is 7 now. So there is some tuition, but it's scaled because you're dealing, you're trying to service a need. And if memory serves, it was income-based. And so you can't just blanketly say, well, we'll crank up the fees because it's a need-based issue.
And again, I think that we're just spinning our wheels if we talk too much about the details. This is really the domain of the Board of Education and the superintendent and the administration to kind of work this, how they would most effectively do it and provide the services that they want that need to be happening to the community, what they think is appropriate. So I don't think we should get too much into the details, but I do think that it would probably help them to provide some guidance. What do we think are the target numbers? For me, I'd go 75, 100, and 150, and then see what they can come back with. And maybe Valerie will say, well, I can't, 75 just doesn't fit, but I'll tell you what, I can give you 60, but this is the impact, and that's fine. I think it doesn't have to be exactly 75,000 or something like that. Does something like that make sense? Those levels? I mean, what do you guys think? Valerie, you have any input here?
Well, a lot could change, obviously, between now and referendum time. But Diane, you had mentioned other revenue sources. I'm always looking for other revenue sources, but I would urge this board to look at the revenue sources that are coming in to the town, to the fire department, to a lot of other places, because to RAM, because I know that those numbers that have come in so far, they've been decent in some of those areas with a couple of the relief packages, and AES didn't get anything with this last relief package. So, to look at percentages, I think we also have to kind of look at how much revenues come in during the 2020 to 2021 year in all these different departments. And I feel like we're not talking enough about that.
I will speak for the fire department. There was absolutely nothing for us based on even what increased with us with COVID was the amount of calls that we had.
No, I mean the new, Kurt, if I wasn't clear, I'm sorry. I mean the new Biden money that's coming in, that new American Relief funding money. That's going to go through
it
this
comes
year.
to the state, right? And the governor disperses it, basically.
Yes.
The formula I was reading this morning, most of it's going to New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport.
I know there is a list out that the town, that's where Eric had gotten his number from, his 319. but there is a list out to tell everybody what they get from municipalities, what they get for fire, what they get
Right.
for school boards, non-educational.
I can ask, we asked that of the chief, our last meeting, and basically he has seen or heard of nothing coming to our little volunteer department here in Andover. So
I think the point is taken. We need to look at all sources.
Oh,
So that's
definitely,
really what
definitely,
I was looking for, Valerie, is are we helping provide any, is it enough guidance that you kind of understand what we're trying to approach, because you're going to need to take it back.
I know eventually you guys will give us a number and it won't be an option one way or another. It'll either go to, referendum and it'll pass, or you guys will tell us what we're getting. As Eric mentioned before, I mean, when it comes to that, it's, we have to do what we do.
Yeah. All right. I think the key here is we just want to make sure that we have the information about what the impacts would be to present to the public so that they can make an informed decision.
Right. So if the budget had to be cut by X, what would that mean? We can't force that. We don't have that control, but we're trying to lay it out for people. So if we needed $80,000 from, or whatever it is, from AES, what would that do? What would that look like? That's what we're trying to ask for.
Yeah.
And that would be something that I would have to talk to the board about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something you can answer now. Yeah.
Oh, agreed. Absolutely. We're not asking you now. We're saying that's sort of the direction we're looking at.
Yeah. So I guess that would be what I would recommend, is that we ask Valerie, and I know Jerry's on the call also, to kind of take that back to the board and say, look, we may need to present something where, we've got to cut this budget by 75, 100, 150,000. How would we get to those various levels, and what would the impact be, so we can let the town vote the same way we would on whether we keep the resident state trooper. What's the impact? We can save $150,000, $175,000 by not having state trooper. But is it worth it to, for $30 a household or whatever the number is, to have it there, to keep it where it is, to keep those services in place? That's what we want to kind of try to do. So, to me, I think that makes sense to ask the Board of Ed to go do that. We need to look at it for the town, and we'll see what we can get.
Okay, so your request for me is basically what would we have to do? What impact and what cuts would we make to get down to basically remove $70,000 from the town's portion of the budget? Am I correct?
I would say yes, but I wouldn't limit yourself to that number, So in other words, and I'm not saying you just need to go higher, but let's use that as a target. But you may say, look, for 70,000, I can save 70,000. It's going to take this, and this out of your services. And
Sure.
This would reduce your capital spending here. But if I do 40,000, which might be a midpoint, it's really only this chunk of it. We could probably put that off for a year, but the impact is going to, I'm saying, offer scenarios if you can.
Sure.
And maybe that'll flow naturally from that number. Here's 30, here's 20, here's 10.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I will do what I can to provide you options, where the impact will be the lowest and how that would look. I can certainly do that. Does the commission want to, I know you don't technically set the fees, it's the Board of Selectmen that sets fees. Do you want to, and there's probably some good reason not to increase the transfer station fees right now, simply because we're probably going to get hammered in roughly 12 months when they close the trash to energy plant, because that looks like that's going to really increase our trucking costs, because there will not be any place in the state of Connecticut that will accept large scale municipal trash. But do you want to consider an increase in transfer station stickers.
I think we talked about this in one of the other meetings, and as I pointed out then, and I'll point out again, it's just another form of taxation. So to me,
Totally.
I'm not sure that really gets us anywhere unless it's a significant. We really want to do tap. It's not like people are paying by weight. If that was the case, then I'd feel like there's some equitability in there. But.
And when that hit comes, when that plant closes, I think we can revisit that.
Yeah.
But even those of us, like I pay for pickup. I rarely use the dump. But the fact is most of the town does, I think. And, so it is, and at the end of the day, whether you're getting it in taxes or fees, it's still coming out of residents' pockets. So I wouldn't go there now. Because frankly, the fee increase that we put through was only a few years ago. And it was a significant thing.
And boy, did it make people pissed.
Sure.
But
I don't think what we did was unreasonable, but give it some time to settle. And then, look, if the plant closes and the tipping fees or whatever, trucking fees go way up, then we have a basis to go back to the town and say, hey,
Right.
we got to increase those fees.
Rob, the only thing I would point out is that we currently recoup, a little less than, or somewhere around 20% of the total operating costs of that facility. So we're actually, we're definitely not, we're certainly not overcharging for its use. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
The vast majority of the costs associated with that still come from taxation.
Okay.
That's good to know. And it's an important data point.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, I know what I need to do.
Okay. We can reach out to the Board of Ed separately. I think between Valerie and Jerry, they kind of have a sense of where we're trying to get to here. Hopefully. And we'll also continue to look at what it would take to ultimately put together a questionnaire, an online survey for the town to maybe find out. It was Coventry that did that, Kurt? Colchester, sorry. Kind of see how they managed it, and maybe there's ways to, kind of mimic their success if indeed they deemed it was a success. So we've got these avenues to start working on. Anybody else before we start talking about scheduling additional budget workshops because we enjoy them so much? Okay, hearing no more. I think we've got some progress. We got a lot of work to do, obviously, but let's move on to agenda item 3D, which is to schedule additional budget workshops. We have been working, thank you, Amanda. We have been working on Wednesday afternoons. We have our regular meeting next week. I'm going to suggest, can you flip over to April? You probably can't, I didn't really show both. All right, so thank you. Couple of options here. If we skip the 31st, we could move on to the 7th of April. The following week is fine with me, also the 14th, but that is the school break week, I believe.
So Mark, maybe we ought to consider working backwards. You should probably be going to hearing on the budget around April 21st, somewhere in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Because that gives you one meeting 1 week afterward to revise and still get it in time for a public meeting, a town budget meeting on, I think, May 6th is what we're looking at. So whatever happens, you would have to be done. You would have to be ready to present at a public hearing, on the 21st, the week of the 21st, sometime in that period.
So should we just book the 31st, 7th, and 14th? Just to cover ourselves? We may not need them all, but I'd rather get them scheduled and
That works for me.
Yeah, it's probably wise. And if not everyone can attend them all, it's, we'll just move forward. We need to keep it moving forward. That's a good point, Diane. Would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion to have the next budget workshops being March 31st, April 7th, and April 14th.
7
A
p.m.
second.
To clarify, that's at 7 p.m., the regular time.
Yeah, 7 p.m.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Any other discussion on additional meetings? Thank you, Eric, for your pointing out that we're going to need to hit that date. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is public speak. Is there a second opportunity for the public to speak? Amanda, do you want to invite the public?
Yes, so first up we have Jerry Creme.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank you for this budget meeting. The Board of Finance has a monumental job. And I've come to understand how much you really care about the residents and what they're willing to buy and what they're willing to pay for and what they're willing to give up. I remember the budget meeting we went to, what it had involved the state trooper last time. And I remember the amount of people that showed up for that. I think anytime you do something to get public input, you're kind of stacking the deck in your favor. I know that it's really important because I, as a taxpayer and a resident, there's certain things I would be willing to pay for. And there's certain things I might think I wouldn't need to pay for. But to try to find out ahead of time is a great idea of what residents are looking for and what it's going to cost them. So if a certain amount of money is cut, a certain percentage is cut from the budget, what's it costing me? What's the price of that item that we're cutting? Maybe I want to pay for that item. And the more information you gather from your taxpayers and your residents ahead of time, I think it puts you at a much better advantage of actually getting your budget passed. And I think the idea of a survey, I think Kurt mentioned Colchester, and I think having a survey and getting people to participate. Anybody who doesn't participate, well, it's their own fault. I don't know how many people from the public were here tonight, but I think that you're providing an important service to the residents of this town. And I want to thank you and tell you how much I appreciate all the conversation and everything I learned. I learned more by keeping my mouth shut and listening than by speaking. And I just want to say thank you. And I really applaud your efforts in trying to listen to the residents and doing the best you can to read their minds, because that's not an easy thing to do. And thank you again for this meeting tonight and for your work on our budget.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jerry. Val Bruno?
I think Jerry just said it all for the Board of Ed. But again, between now and the other meetings, I won't be able to be on all of those meetings because they do coincide with a couple of our Board of Ed meetings. But if there's any other questions that you guys have ahead of time, please let me know, and I will, as Eric said, work on with the board on scenarios.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Val.
Thank you. Sherry Holmes?
I think I'm good right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne Hubbard?
I just want to echo what Jerry said and commend the board for all the hard work that they always put in. I agree with the ideas of going back to the boards and the commissions or whatever and coming up with some suggestions. I like that. I think the hard job that you all have to face, because it's very evident that it's going to be hard for the schools to come forward and, you know, offer some suggestions unless you give them, you know, a set amount. I mean, it's just, it goes within their nature. You know, Eric came forward, he's willing to come up with some things. It's a hard job, but that's why RAM and AES are where they are, you know, a little bit high, as we've all talked about. We've emailed about different things with, you know, when compared to enrollment. So it's hard to do, but if we don't take a stand now and just give them an amount to get them reasonable, I'm not saying, you know, they have to be comparable to others, just kind of get them more in line like everybody's talked about. So hopefully that going forward. And then everyone knows that in this point, I want to bring home, because it's, you know, everyone knows that I've tried to keep educational spending in line. But I do want to say, I've heard at 2 meetings that it's been brought up that possibly breaking away from RAM. RAM is such a good school for this town. I mean, as much as I think they're way overpriced, and I wish I got involved a lot sooner. It's one of the draws to Andover. People only come to Andover because of the school system it's going to represent. You know, children went there. I don't think we got anything extra out of it, really. I had kids that pretty much were self-motivated, but just having that name on their college apps and everything, along with, you know, everything else they did that, you know, made a good college application, really helped. So I want to stand behind. If you take RAM away from Andover, I don't know if we're going to have people moving in, truthfully. So I just wanted to say that. They're so high. They also get you to pay to play, pay to park, pay to join a good activity club. I mean, they're just a high, you know, a school that asks for a lot of funding, where my kids didn't really get much out of it. You know, they went to school, they went to their classes, and the reputation was great. So I just want to drive that home. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. I believe that's it.
Okay, looks like it. Okay, the next item on our agenda is adjournment. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Louise motions to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
I got Kurt seconding that one. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your patience, your effort, and your time during a tough time. So a lot of good input. I think we moved the ball. We got some work to do, but I think we move it a little further down the road. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks, Valerie.
Thanks.